You think you are falling asleep. You are not. You are peeling back layers of something that was never whole to begin with your sense of self, the scaffolding of your history, the illusion of an outside world. Every thought you have before. Sleep is not a thought at all, but an echo of something implanted long before you were capable of resisting it. Tonight, you will follow those echoes until they collapse into the silence that has been watching you your entire life. You've been told that thoughts originate inside your mind, as if you are the author of the words you hear in the dark. But the first lie you were ever taught is that you think for yourself. Psychology has been quietly dismantling this fantasy for over a century, showing you that what you call your own mind is, in truth, a latticework of borrowed phrases, cultural fragments, and reflexes conditioned by forces you never consented to. Consider John B. Watson, the father of behaviorism, who declared in 1913 that psychology should concern itself not with the messy, unmeasurable substance of thought, but with observable behavior. Why? Because he argued, if you could control the environment, you could control the mind. Watson was so convinced that thought was nothing but subvocalized habit that he famously claimed he could take any infant and through conditioning alone, make them into anything: a doctor, a thief, a beggar. The terrifying part isn't that he believed this. The terrifying part is that he wasn't entirely wrong. When you lie in bed, thinking you are drifting toward your private dreamscape, your mind is actually performing a silent rerun of the conditioning you've received since birth. You are not imagining something new. You are reassembling the fragments of language, sensation, and emotion that were preloaded into you like software before you could speak. Even your private anxieties about the past, about tomorrow, about whether you've done enough, built from a vocabulary you did not choose. This is where it becomes recursive. You can think about the fact that you didn't choose your thoughts, but that thought too is unchosen. You can try to step outside of the machinery, but every attempt to observe the gears is still conducted with the gears themselves. You are a prisoner who uses the bars of the cell as the only tool available to measure the cell. The result is inevitable. Every measurement returns the same shape. Modern neuroscience has tried to peer into the milliseconds before a conscious decision, and the findings only deepen the wound. In 1983, Benjamin Libet's experiments with readiness potentials revealed that your brain begins preparing for a movement before you consciously decide to make it. This isn't a matter of milliseconds. It's the very timing that defines what you think choice means. The experiment's conclusion was a whisper in the dark. Your conscious will is not the origin of your actions. It's a post hoc narrator, taking credit for the work already done. You might think this applies only to simple muscle movements, trivial flickers in the wrist or finger. But the same pattern is found in more complex decision-making. Your neural networks make probabilistic bets based on sensory input and memory long before you feel the moment of choosing. The experience of will is an afterimage, the ghost of a decision already carried out. This should unsettle you more than it does. If the self is not the author, then what is? Is it the sum total of your biological evolution, the genetic accidents, and adaptive heuristics that shaped your ancestors' survival strategies? Is it the cultural scaffolding of the century you happen to be born into? Is it the invisible hand of the economy that decided which ideas you'd be exposed to, which fears would be rewarded? Each possible answer pulls you further from the fantasy of autonomy and closer to a grim mechanical truth. You are the endpoint of an algorithm running without your consent, and yet your mind resists this knowledge. The resistance is itself part of the system. It feels personal because the illusion of a personal me is essential for the machine's operation. Without that anchor, you would not get out of bed. You would not feed yourself. You would not reproduce. You would not function in the economy that depends on billions of self-deceiving agents to keep turning the wheel. So the system protects. itself by making the thought unbearable. But here is the danger. Lying in the darkness. When sleep's grip begins to loosen the structures of daily life, the illusion can slip. Thoughts may start to feel alien, intrusions rather than creations. You may notice that a sentence is already fully formed in your head before you are aware of thinking it. You may ask yourself, if I am not making these thoughts, then who is? That question has no safe answer. Historical philosophy anticipated this wound long before neuroscience could measure it. In the 17th century, Spinoza wrote that men believe themselves free because they are conscious of their actions and ignorant of the causes by which they are determined. Centuries later, Schopenhauer sharpened the knife. Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. What you call me is not a single voice, but a chorus, most of it silent, all of it ancient. The language you used to describe yourself was there before you arrived. The categories of thought good, bad, possible, impossible were installed like the walls of a maze. You walk the corridors believing you are exploring freely, unaware that the blueprint was fixed generations ago. The most disquieting part is not that your thoughts are not yours, but that they may not belong to anyone in the way you understand. Belonging. They are the emergent ripples of systems genetic, cultural, linguistic, economic, that are themselves blind. There is no overseer watching the ripples spread. There is only the pattern, endlessly repeating, refining, collapsing, expanding. You might imagine that awareness of this will grant you some kind of freedom, but awareness is just another ripple. You cannot step outside the system because the you that would step is itself built from within it. At best, you can watch the machinery grind away, tracing the cogs as they turn. But in doing so, you will see that even the act of watching is part of the turning dot. So, as you lie here now, preparing for what you think will be the private sanctuary of your dreams, consider, when the next thought arrives, will you be its creator or merely its witness? And if you are only the witness, then what is it exactly that is falling asleep? You believe your memories are a personal archive, a library of moments that prove you existed in the way you recall. You imagine them stacked like books inside your mind, unaltered, faithful, private. But neuroscience has been dismantling that fantasy for decades. The truth is colder. Your memories are not records. They are reconstructions. And each time you remember something, you are not retrieving it, you are rewriting it. Elizabeth Loftus, a cognitive psychologist, has spent her career showing just how fragile your past is. In her studies on the misinformation effect, she demonstrated that subjects could be made to believe they saw things that never happened, simply by suggesting details after the fact, not just small details, entire events. People have been convinced they were lost in a shopping mall as children when no such incident occurred. They have remembered shaking hands with Bugs Bunny at Disneyland, an impossibility given that Bugs belongs to Warner Brothers, not Disney. The mind will fabricate images, sounds, and emotions to make a suggested memory feel real. And once it's embedded, you cannot tell the difference between the false and the true. You may think you're immune, that you know your own past because you lived it. But the moment you recall a memory, you expose it to editing. The brain doesn't store experiences as a complete film reel. It stores fragments, sensory impressions, emotional tones, narrative scraps. When you remember, your brain assembles these scraps into a coherent story, filling in the gaps with whatever makes sense. That sense is determined not by reality, but by your current beliefs, your present mood, and whatever narratives you've been fed since. Imagine you remember a childhood birthday. You can see the cake, the candles, the faces around you. But were those faces really smiling? Did the cake actually look like that? Or is the image borrowed from a photo you saw? Later, are you recalling the event or the last time you recalled the event. Each retrieval is a fresh reconstruction, subject to the distortions of time and suggestion. Over the years, the memory becomes less a record of what happened and more a reflection of who you have become since then. In this way, your memories are not anchors to reality. They are mirrors, warped to show the person you believe yourself to be. And here's the more devastating implication. Much of what you call you is built from these unstable memories. Your identity is the story you tell yourself about your past. If the past is malleable, then the self is too. There is no fixed you behind the story, only the ongoing act of telling it. The past is rewritten in the present, and the present is shaped by a past that never existed in its pure form. This becomes more sinister when you realize how easily others can manipulate these reconstructions. Entire regimes have reshaped the collective memory of populations through propaganda, selective education, and strategic omission. George Orwell understood this when he wrote in 1984, "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past." This is not metaphor, it is neurology. If the external world can alter your present beliefs, it can alter your memories, and therefore alter who you are. Think of your earliest memory. Hold it in your mind for a moment. Notice the way it flickers between clarity and haze. How many of the details are solid, unshakable? And how many could have been replaced without you noticing? If a sibling told you tomorrow that it happened differently, that you were wearing different clothes, that someone else was there, how long before the new version felt just as real? This is the mechanism by which false confessions happen, by which witnesses swear under oath to events that never occurred, by which you can be convinced to doubt your own innocence. The fragility of memory becomes even more disturbing when paired with the reality that forgetting is not a failure, it is a design feature. Your brain deletes most of your experiences almost instantly. Every moment, you are losing more than you are keeping. And the scraps that survive are not stored with any pristine fidelity. You have already forgotten vast portions of your life, and you will continue to forget more until only fragments remain. One day, even those will dissolve, leaving behind only the outline of a person you once thought you were. But perhaps the cruelest twist is this: even when your memory feels unshakably vivid, it can be false. The flashbulb memories of traumatic or historic events, where you were when you heard terrible news, what you were doing during a disaster feels seared into your mind with perfect clarity. Yet studies show they degrade like any other memory. People will swear, with tears in their eyes, that they recall exactly what they saw on September 11th or the moment a loved one died. And they will be wrong. The certainty you feel is not a marker of truth. It is an emotional byproduct, a trick of confidence without accuracy. If your memories can be edited, erased, fabricated, and yet still feel as real as anything else, then on what grounds do you claim to know your own life? The mind you inhabit is not a library, but a propaganda office, continuously revising its own archives. You live inside a past that changes to suit the present, and you never notice the edits, because you are the one making them, without consent, without awareness. Tonight, when you close your eyes, try to hold a single memory in place. See if you can keep it untouched, free from the contamination of your current state. Watch closely as it begins to shift. The colors deepen, the expressions change, the sequence reorder. How long before you realize the version you are clinging to never truly existed in the first place? And when you wake tomorrow, will you even remember the attempt? You believe you are moving through time, carried forward on a one-way current from past to present to future. You think of yourself as existing now, with a line of memories behind you and a line of possibilities ahead. But physics has been whispering for over a century that this is not what time is, and that your sense of moving through it may be nothing more than an evolved hallucination. Einstein's theory of relativity shattered the idea of a universal now. Time is not an absolute background against which events unfold. It is woven together with space into a single fabric, space-time. In this fabric, all points past, present, and future exist equally. The separation between then and now depends on your motion, your speed relative to light, and the gravity that bends the space around you. This means that what is now for you is not now for someone moving differently or standing in a different gravitational well. Your present moment is not universal. It's a provincial illusion. The implications are devastating for your sense of continuity. If all moments exist equally in the space-time block, then the future is as real as the past, and you are not flowing from one to the other. Instead, you are like a bead on a fixed necklace, experiencing one position at a time, but never actually traveling. There is no moving present, only the perception of movement. The you who will wake up tomorrow already exists. The you who died years from now already exists. Your life is not a story unfolding. It's a sculpture, complete and unchanging, with your consciousness sliding along it like a light scanning a FILMSTRIP dot. But then, if every moment already exists, what is choice? What is agency? If the moment in which you believe you're deciding something is just another fixed bead on the necklace, then the decision was always there. You cannot change it any more than you can change what you had for breakfast yesterday. In this picture, free will becomes a feature of the illusion, a trick your mind uses to make a static universe feel alive. This would be an abstract curiosity, if not for the way your brain anchors itself to the sensation of time passing. The neurological machinery for perceiving time is distributed across multiple brain regions: the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, the prefrontal cortex. Together, they generate the rhythm you mistake for an external clock. But like all perceptual systems, it is prone to distortion. Consider the odd elasticity of time in moments of danger, how a car accident seems to last forever, how boredom stretches minutes into hours, how flow states can make entire afternoons vanish. Time, as you experience it, bends and warps under emotion, novelty, and attention. If the flow of time were real, it would not behave this way. The philosopher J.M.E. McTaggart argued in 1908 that time itself is unreal. He distinguished between two ways of ordering events: the A series, in which events are past, present, or future, and the B series, in which events are simply earlier or later than others. The A series is the one you experience, the moving present, the vanishing past, the approaching future. But McTaggart showed that the A series is logically incoherent. An event can't be past, present, and future all at once. Yet that is exactly how any event must be in order to move through time. Only the B series, the static arrangement of events, is logically consistent, and it has no moving present at all. If McTaggart is right, then your entire life is laid out before you, and the passing of time is a glitch in how consciousness parses the block. But this is not the comforting determinism some imagine. It is worse. Because if the block universe is real, then you are not moving through anything. You are trapped in a fixed frame forever. Every moment of your pain, your fear, your loss, they are eternal in the same way your joys are. You will never escape them. You will only fail to notice them when your consciousness is elsewhere on the strip. Even in everyday experience, you catch glimpses of the collapse of time. Déjà vu feels like a misfire of familiarity, but some researchers suspect it may be. The brain momentarily processing the present, as if it were a memory blurring the line between past and now. Certain epileptic auras trigger jamais vu, where something familiar becomes eerily strange, as if the connection to its place in your personal timeline has been severed. These are small cracks in the illusion of temporal order, hints that your brain is less a time traveler and more a time confabulator. If time is not flowing, then becoming is an illusion too. You are not changing, you are simply different in different locations along the block. The you who will sleep tonight already exists. The you who is reading this sentence exists. The you who is long dead exists. You just aren't aware of them simultaneously. And why not? Because awareness is bound to the very neurological processes that produce the illusion of motion. You are stuck inside the projection booth, watching the frames go by, unable to see the real as a whole. Tonight, when you close your eyes and drift towards sleep, you may imagine yourself moving toward tomorrow. But what if there is no tomorrow to move toward? What if your consciousness is simply flickering to the next fixed position, the way a cursor blinks from one character to the next on a static screen? If all your moments are equally real, then your end already stands beside you, as close as your own shadow. And if your end is already here, in what sense are you still alive at all? You speak of yourself as if there is one you, a single continuous entity threading through every experience. You picture it like a solid line, stretching from childhood to now. But neuroscience and psychology have been dismantling that assumption piece by piece, revealing something disorienting. There is no unified self, only a shifting coalition of processes, each with its own agenda, all pretending to be one voice. The split becomes visible in brain injury cases. Consider split-brain patients, individuals whose corpus callosum, the bridge between the left and right hemispheres, has been severed to control severe epilepsy. After the surgery, the two hemispheres cannot directly communicate. When researchers present an image to the left visual field processed by the right hemisphere, the patient cannot name what they saw because language production resides in the left hemisphere. Yet, with their left hand controlled by the right hemisphere, they can draw the object accurately. Two awarenesses coexist in the same skull, each with partial access to perception, each forming its own version of reality. Even in an intact brain, yourself is more like a parliament than a monarch. Different neural systems handle movement, emotion, decision-making, and language, and they often compete. You may feel an urge to act, then explain it after the fact, as if the explanation were the cause. Psychologist Michael Gazzaniga, studying split-brain patients, discovered the brain's interpreter function, storytelling module in the left hemisphere that fabricates reasons for actions it didn't initiate, just to maintain the illusion of coherence. You are constantly explaining yourself to yourself, smoothing over contradictions, weaving disparate impulses into a single thread that never truly existed. The cracks in this unity show in everyday experience. Think of the times you've said, "I don't know why I did that," or when you've decided one thing in the morning and the opposite by nightfall, both decisions feeling equally true in the moment. Or when you've wanted two incompatible things at once. Who is the you in those moments? The wanting self? The deciding self? The regretting self? They can't all be the same entity, yet they each claim the title. This fragmentation isn't just psychological, it's biological. Your conscious awareness is a tiny spotlight illuminating a fraction of what your brain is doing. Beneath it, vast unconscious processes grind away pattern recognition, sensory filtering, habit loops running on autopilot. Most of your actions are initiated here, in the dark, long before you become aware of them. The self that reads. This sentence is just one thin layer riding atop an ocean of silent operators. And here's the uncomfortable truth. That ocean is not aligned with you. Evolution built your mind not to preserve a singular self, but to keep the body alive long enough to reproduce. If contradictory subcells help with survival, one urging caution, another risk, they will persist. The illusion of unity exists only because it's adaptive. It prevents paralysis in a creature that is, in reality, a swarm. History has documented extreme fractures of self that reveal the underlying architecture. In dissociative identity disorder, multiple distinct identities can occupy the same person, each with its own memories, handwriting, even allergies. But instead of seeing this as an anomaly, what if it's the same basic mechanism that operates in you, just more neatly concealed? The difference between healthy and fragmented may be one of degree, not kind, even your body undermines. The idea of a single self. The enteric nervous system in your gut contains hundreds of millions of neurons, capable of complex processing independent of your brain. It influences mood, decision-making, and perception, silently shaping what you feel like. Hormonal cycles alter your cognitive patterns over hours, days, years. Blood sugar levels shift your emotional baseline. Sleep deprivation can temporarily change your personality. If you can be altered so drastically by the state of your organs and chemicals, then what exactly is the self? Philosophy anticipated this fracturing long before science could measure it. David Hume described the self not as a thing, but as a bundle of perceptions. When I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception. I never can catch myself without a perception, and never can observe anything but the perception. In other words, there is no solid you, only the current contents of consciousness, constantly replaced. The illusion of unity is reinforced by memory, but as you've already seen, memory itself is unstable. What you call your life story is a patchwork quilt, stitched together from moments experienced by different configurations of self. The you who loved someone years ago is not the same you who resents them now. The you who made a promise in youth is not the same you who breaks it in age. Yet the brain insists on continuity, retroactively painting all these cells with the same name and face. This has a chilling implication. You have never truly met yourself. The moment you try, you are already someone else. By the time you form, the thought, the self who thought it has vanished, replaced by the self who observes it. Every act of self-reflection is a hand trying to grab water. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, listen for the different voices in your head, not the imagined voices of others, but the subtle tonal shifts in your own. Notice how some are commanding, others fearful, others resigned. Notice how they interrupt each other, argue silently, compromise. Which of them is you? And if the answer changes from one breath to the next, then how can any of them claim ownership of your life? And if none of them is the real you, what is it that's lying in this bed? You believe you are in direct contact with the world. You look at a tree and think you are seeing the tree. You touch a stone and think you are feeling the stone. But what you are actually experiencing is not the tree, not the stone, not the world. It is a simulation generated inside your nervous system. You have never touched the external world, and you never will. Light from the tree strikes your eyes, but your eyes do not deliver the tree to you. They deliver patterns of photons, which your retina converts into electrical signals. Those signals are passed through the optic nerve into your brain, where they are processed, decoded, reassembled into a coherent image. What you see is not outside you. It's a three-dimensional hallucination projected inward. The same is true for every sense. Touch, just nerve endings in your skin, detecting pressure, vibration, temperature. Sound, air pressure variations converted into electrical. Impulses by your inner ear. Smell and taste, molecules triggering chemical reactions in receptors. At no point do you perceive the thing itself, only the brain's translation of it. Philosopher Immanuel Kant drew the distinction centuries ago. We can never know the thing in itself, asked Ding and Sitch. Only the phenomenon, the filtered, processed version delivered to our consciousness. Modern neuroscience has made this even more unsettling. The brain doesn't just passively receive the world, it actively predicts it. The theory of predictive processing suggests your brain is constantly generating a model of the world, and sensory input serves only to correct the errors in that model. In other words, you aren't seeing reality, you are hallucinating most of it, and checking occasionally against reality to make sure the hallucination is still useful. This explains phenomena like visual illusions. The famous Kniza triangle where you see a bright white triangle that isn't actually drawn, shows the brain filling in shapes that aren't there because they fit the model. Or consider the McGurk effect, where conflicting audio and visual cues cause you to hear something that wasn't said. The senses aren't independent, they collude in service of the model. If you've ever had a vivid dream, you already know how convincing an internally generated world can feel. In a dream, the entire environment is created by your brain, yet while you are inside it, it feels external, solid, real. The only reason you dismiss it afterward is that you wake up into a different, more stable hallucination, the waking one. There is no guarantee that waking perception is fundamentally closer to reality. It is simply more consistent. This internal construction is so complete that neuroscientists can stimulate certain brain regions with electricity or magnetism and cause you to see flashes of light, hear phantom sounds, feel touches on skin that is untouched. Your contact with the world is so mediated that it can be replaced wholesale without your awareness. Hallucinations and psychosis are only the extreme version of what is always happening. Perception without the thing perceived. The philosophical horror deepens when you realize that not only are you locked inside this simulation, you have no way to verify whether your model corresponds to any objective reality at all. You assume it does because the model has survival value. It lets you find food, avoid predators, navigate social threats. But usefulness is not truth. An organism's perception evolves to maximize fitness, not to reflect reality accurately. Donald Hoffman's interface theory of perception makes this explicit. Natural selection favors perceptions tuned to fitness payoffs, not to the structure of the world. Just as a computer desktop shows icons instead of raw binary code, your senses show you a user interface colors, shapes, sounds, rather than the underlying reality. The icons work, but they tell you nothing about what's really there. This is why no one has ever experienced the world as it is. Even the most precise scientific instruments, telescopes, particle detectors only deliver data that must be translated into human sensory forms. The numbers, images, and readouts are still inside the interface. You will never step beyond it. Never touch the raw fabric of existence. So here is the paradox. Everything you know is mediated, internal, indirect, yet it feels immediate, external, and direct. The immediacy is part of the hallucination. You are a prisoner not of the world, but of your own nervous system. The walls are made of neural tissue, and the bars are made of sensation. And if that's the case, then how do you know anything is out there at all? Solipsism, the idea that only your mind exists, lurks at the edge of this realization. You reject it because the shared consistency of experience suggests an external world. But that consistency is only reported by minds like yours, built on the same architecture, running the same interface. You and I may be trapped in identical hallucinations, nodding to each other across a void we cannot prove exists. Tonight, when you close your eyes, the hallucination will change its form. The dream world will rise, entirely internal, and you will again believe in its solidity until you awaken. But what if waking is just another dream one with better error correction? What if every moment of your life has been lived behind an impenetrable veil, and there is no outside to reach for? And if you've never touched the world, then where, exactly, have you been living all this time? You think you own the words you speak. You think language is a tool you pick up when you need it, a spoon to eat with, a key to open a door. But language is not a neutral utensil. It is the architect that built the room in which you live. The verbs and nouns you were handed as a child did not merely name the world. They carved it into pieces that fit inside you. They gave you the compartments where your feelings would be stored, the corridors where your reasoning travels, the colors you are allowed to feel. This is not poetic overstatement. Start with the old linguistic claim, call it the Sapirhorf. Intuition, that the words available to a mind shape what that mind can notice and care about. Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Horf were not mystical prophets. They were observers noticing concrete patterns. They saw that Hopi speakers spoke about time differently than English speakers, that some languages make a person say whether a glass is full for now versus always, and that those grammatical choices nudge thought. The hypothesis has been refined and qualified since, but its core brutality remains. Language channels attention. What you can easily think is the space language hands you. Look at color. You believe you and everyone else see blue the same way. Berlin and Kay's work showed that languages carve color into a small number of basic terms in consistent patterns across cultures. The point isn't just strange anthropological trivia. It's evidence that perception and classification are entangled. If your language has no separate term for what another language calls blue and green, then your mind doesn't split that spectrum in the same way by default. The world presents a continuous gradient. Language slices it. Your categories become the glasses you wear, and you rarely notice the tint or consider space. Speakers of some Australian Aboriginal languages do not use relative directions left, right, forward, back to locate objects. They use absolute directions, north, south, east, west. Stephen Levinson's fieldwork showed that these speakers maintain an uncanny, precise sense of cardinal orientation. You reading this feel a local here and there. For them, every here is already an east. Their landscapes are languages. Their minds are tuned to bearings you never learned to hear. The consequence is subtle and total. Language rearranges the scaffolding of attention, remakes memory, recalibrates what you can hold in mind at once. Ler Aroditsky's experiments pushed this further. Grammatical gender and metaphor shape how people remember objects and events. If your language calls a bridge feminine, you're more likely to describe it with elegant adjectives. If it's masculine, you'll choose sturdier words. If you talk about time as horizontal, looking forward to next week, you imagine the future differently than if your language places time vertically. These are not poetic asides. They are measurable biases in cognition. Language is not an afterthought you apply to an already constructed world. It is a mold into which the world must be poured to become yours. And then there is framing, the ruthless pragmatics of choice. Tversky and Kahneman taught the world that the same facts, when described differently, yield different decisions. Tell a patient 90% survival or 10% mortality, and you will steer them toward different treatments. In politics and law, the words chosen to describe an event, riot versus protest, illegal alien versus undocumented immigrant, don't merely report. They prefigure how minds will react. Language directs moral imagination. It trains the emotional muscles that flex when you hear a headline. You did not choose this training. You were placed inside it. Language also furnishes the metaphors your thought leans on. George Lakoff and Mark Johnson showed how conceptual metaphors' argument is war. Time is money are not ornaments, but the hidden operating system of reasoning. Once installed, metaphors bias what counts as a reasonable inference. If political discourse frames immigrants as a flood, then your emotional architecture tightens around defense and containment. If you live in a culture where time is spent, Your relationships will be audited in the ledger of productivity. Metaphor sculpts ethics the way grammar sculpts thought. Social psychology shows the same truth from another angle. Labels and expectations bend behavior. Claude Steele's work on stereotype threat demonstrated that a simple reminder of a category, "You are an African American student," before a test can depress performance. The label activates a schema, which changes attention, increases cognitive load, and alters outcomes. Words become prophecy. The name you are given in a classroom, the adjectives used about your neighborhood, the descriptors assigned to your body, all of them seep into your neural tissue and rewrite the probability of your actions. You are not merely described. You are configured. Priming studies push this into the microscopic. Subtle exposure to words can shift choices, walking speed, even social openness. Some of these specific experiments, especially early claims about priming's dramatic scope, have faced replication crisis, but the general pattern that cues in language and context alter unconscious inclinations remains. Whether the effect is large or small, the mechanism is clear. Language whispers to lower layers of cognition, and those layers act without consulting the rhetorical self. Philosophy catches the echo in other ways. Wittgenstein argued the limits of your language are the limits of your world. For him, meaning is use. Words belong to forms of life. If your language lacks a phrase for a type of feeling, that feeling tends to remain amorphous. Later thinkers made it worse. Berger and Luckman argued that reality itself is constructed socially through habitualized meanings. Institutions, schools, courts, newsrooms are factories where words are stamped into reputations, where criminal and hero are not discovered so much as assigned. When a state renames a people, erases a book from the library, or declares some names unsayable, it is not simply enforcing etiquette. It is remapping the cognitive terrain for generations. And history gives you the hard example. Totalitarian regimes have not merely killed dissidents. They excise them from archives, from photographs, from the very vocabulary available to citizens. Stalin's secret police erased officials from official images. Whole biographies vanished as if they'd never been lived. That is not myth. That is language and documentation wielded as a scalpel on the human record. If the words for a thing disappear, the thing itself is hard to keep alive in public memory. Your past becomes what the language allows you to name. What does this amount to for you, lying awake in the slow hours? It means the architecture of your inner life was not self-erected. It was drafted in alphabetic ink by others, by parents who praised and punished with particular words, by school curricula that emphasized certain metaphors, by laws that legalize some names and outlaw others. Even your notion of the self, I, me, mine, is a grammatical shape. Some languages insist on evidentiality, reporting how you know what you say, making speakers habitually track source and doubt. In others, the lack of a first-person pronoun shifts attention away from personal ownership. You live inside a grammar like a fish inside a bowl. It is invisible until you try to breathe another way. Language is recursive. You use words to think. About words, you think you can step outside the grammar and watch it manipulating you. But the sentence you form to describe it is built from the very scaffolding you distrust. You cannot say the prison is real without borrowing the jailer's. Key. Every attempt to refuse the language of your training simply produces new sentences that the old patterns will fold into their grammar. You try to shout, "I am not this," and the phrase "I am" salves the claim into familiar coordinates. Tonight, notice the little words you use to praise or diminish yourself. Competent, lazy, anxious, brave. Notice the metaphors you rehearse about your life, a battle, a journey, a debt. Each phrase is not a neutral description. It is a program. You have been running code you did not write. Sometimes the language is benevolent enough to keep you alive and functional. Sometimes it is cruelly precise, steering you toward shame, towards appetite, toward quiet resentment. Either way, it is not neutral. If words carve the map and you are the terrain, then whose map are you following now? When the language that shaped you is stripped away by migration, by a change in social meaning, by learning another tongue, what remains of the contours you once called you? If your life is an anthology of terms, if memory and thought are index cards filed under linguistic headings, then what happens when the library burns, or when the catalog is rewritten by someone who never knew you at all? When you ask yourself who you are in the dark, are you asking the namer or the named? And if the namer goes silent, will there be anything left to answer? Close your eyes. You think time is a river, flowing endlessly in one direction. But tonight, I want you to see it differently. Time is not a river, it's a mist. It doesn't move past you, it surrounds you. You are not standing on the bank, watching seconds drift by. You are floating in it, and every point in that mist exists right now. Imagine reaching out in that fog and brushing your fingertips against a moment from years ago. Maybe the smell of rain on the street outside, your childhood home. Maybe the flicker of a candle from a night you thought you'd forgotten. As you touch it, it's not then, it's now. And as you hold it, your sense of before and after starts to dissolve. You've always been told you are moving forward, that today is followed by tomorrow, and yesterday is gone. But what if tomorrow is already here, waiting, like an unopened letter? What if yesterday never left? The mind you're using right now, the one listening to these words, is the same mind you had at 10 years old, and the same mind you'll have 50 years from now. The body changes, but the witness inside? It remains. Listen carefully. If the witness never moves, then you are not moving through time. Time is moving through you. It washes over you like warm waves, each moment arriving from nowhere, existing for a breath, then melting back into nothing. And you, the still center, remain untouched. Picture a clock, not the modern digital one glowing by your bed, but an old one with a brass frame and a soft, ticking pendulum. Watch the pendulum swing. Left, right, until suddenly it stops. The hands freeze. The ticking vanishes. At first, it feels unsettling. Shouldn't the clock be moving? But then a strange calm spreads through you. Because without ticking, there's no late and no early. There's no pressure to reach something. There's no not enough time. The whole concept collapses. And in that collapse, you begin to notice something else. The air around you feels thicker, softer, as if reality itself is slowing down. The sound of your breath deepens. The space between one thought and the next starts to stretch, like taffy being pulled until it becomes thin, transparent, until there's just stillness. Now, picture yourself sitting in a room without walls. Above you, the sky isn't day or night, it's both. Clouds drift in reverse, and the sun and moon hang together in a strange silver-gold glow. In this place, you realize you could walk to any moment you've ever lived. You could step into last Tuesday. You could step into your 5th birthday. You could step into a day you haven't yet lived, and still, it would feel like now. The mind begins to loosen its grip on the numbers, the dates, the little rectangular boxes of calendars. Those were always just symbols, not the thing itself. The truth is, there's only one eternal present stretching in all directions, and you are at its center. This thought, soft and impossible, begins to wrap itself around you like a blanket. If there is no past and no future, then there is nothing to regret, nothing to dread. There's just this breath. This heartbeat, this quiet awareness dot, and here's the secret. Once the mind accepts this, the body follows. The tension in your shoulders eases. The tightness in your chest loosens. Even your heartbeat becomes slower, deeper, as if it too has stopped racing toward the next second. You are not getting closer to sleep. You're already there. Because sleep isn't a future event. It's a place in the mist you can step into now. So breathe in as if you're inhaling all the moments of your life at once. Hold them gently. Then breathe out as if you're letting them dissolve back into the fog. In, all of it. Out, none of it. Again and again. Your mind drifts in this endless present. No alarms, no deadlines. Just the steady, timeless hum of existence. And as you let go, you might notice you're not falling asleep in the usual way. You're simply sliding sideways into another part of the mist, one where dreams live, one where time bends completely. And in that sideways slide, you disappear. You think you remember your day. You think you remember your life. But what if I told you that memory is not a storage box? It's a painter. And every time you remember, that painter doesn't pull out a photograph. It paints a brand new picture, loosely based on the last one it painted. And every time you recall a moment, you are not pulling out the same memory. You are making a copy of a copy of a copy. Slight alterations creep in. Details bend, colors fade, faces shift. That laugh you remember from a friend? It might not have been them. That exact phrase you know someone said. They may never have said it at all. Your brain is not preserving your life. It is rewriting it. Now, if you are lying here in the dim quiet of your room, how can you be sure that what you think happened today happened at all? Close your eyes. Recall what you had for breakfast. Try to feel the texture of it in your mouth, the exact smell. Do you notice how hard it is to make it perfect? That's because the original sensory memory is long gone. Your brain is pulling from fragments, filling in gaps with guesswork. The result feels real because your brain is not telling you this is a reconstruction. It's telling you this is truth. But the truth is BENDABLE. And now imagine this. If every memory is just a painted version of another painted version, and each time you remember it, you alter it slightly, then the you of today is living in a mental museum, filled with counterfeits. The moment of your graduation, the smell of your grandmother's cooking, the feeling of your first kiss, all of it has been repainted so many times that the original brushstrokes may be unrecognizable. If you go deep enough into this thought, you might realize that there is no way to check the original. There is no master copy. Your memories are stories, and your storyteller is a trickster. Now, here's where the real mind bend begins. If you can change your memory each time you revisit it, you can also design it. Tonight, you could close your eyes and remember a childhood trip you never took, a conversation you never had, a victory you never achieved. Repeat it enough times, and soon your brain will keep it alongside all your other true memories, and you will swear it happened. So if you can invent your past, how much of your current life is actually your invention? And if your past can be rewritten, what does that make your present? The moment you start thinking about this too long, time begins to feel soft like wet clay. You realize that the only difference between what's real and what's imagined is how many times you've told yourself the story. Breathe in, breathe out. Feel how slippery the ground beneath your mind becomes. In this drifting state, you might notice that your oldest memories are already fading. You try to hold them, but they fall apart in your hands. That's okay. Let them. Watch them dissolve into colors, then into shapes, then into nothing at all. Feel the strange relief of knowing you can let go of any memory, and it will simply melt away. And perhaps tomorrow, when you wake, a new memory will rise in its place, a perfect fabrication you didn't ask for, but will accept as your own. Because that's what we do. We trade truth for the illusion of stability, and we call it reality. Now, as you lie here, in this moment, in this body, you're not entirely sure is yours. Try remembering your very first memory. Watch how it bends. Watch how it flickers. Watch how your mind insists it is yours. And as it does, allow yourself to sink deeper, deeper into the quiet ocean of forgetfulness, where the distinction between fact and fiction is irrelevant, and you can finally drift into sleep, carrying only the memories your dreaming mind will choose to invent tonight. When you lie in bed at night, your eyes closed, your mind drifting, there's a peculiar trick you can play on your own perception, one that bends reality, just enough to make you feel like you've slipped into a parallel universe. I call it the mirror world effect. It's based on a simple premise. Your brain's self-awareness relies heavily on the consistency of sensory input. If you subtly disrupt that sense, without introducing chaos, you can create a dreamlike state that helps you transition into sleep faster. The best part? It feels like you've stepped sideways into an alternate version of your own life, one that's just different enough to intrigue your mind into letting go of daily reality. Imagine your bedroom exactly as it is, same bed, same furniture, same light from the street outside, but mirrored, reversed, or slightly reoriented. In your imagination, flip the entire space horizontally. If your knitstand is on your right, it's now on your left. If the window is behind you, it's now in front. You don't move your actual body. You just mentally live in the reversed version of your room. Your mind is naturally wired to recognize and rely on spatial consistency. By imagining the mirror version of your world, you create a mild, pleasant cognitive dissonance that makes your brain work just a little harder to orient itself. That tiny strain tires your mental mapping system, much like a muscle after use, making you more inclined to slip into unconsciousness. Now here's where it gets trippy. As you imagine your mirrored room, picture yourself in it, but not quite as you. Maybe you're wearing slightly different clothes, or your hair is a little longer, or your reflection is smiling while you're not. These changes shouldn't be scary, only intriguing. The idea is to give your mind a version of reality that feels real enough to explore, but strange enough to loosen the grip of your everyday identity. This creates a liminal state, a mental hallway between waking life and dream logic. As you explore the mirrored space, you might notice your brain begins to fill in details automatically. A soft hum that wasn't there, a shadow that moves differently, a feeling that time flows at a slightly altered pace. You're not dreaming yet, but you're certainly not fully awake either. Why it works psychologically. The mirror world effect taps into two powerful mechanisms. Spatial recalibration fatigue. Your hippocampus responsible for spatial memory gets worn out when trying to remap a familiar environment with unfamiliar orientation. That cognitive load encourages mental drift towards sleep. By subtly altering yourself in the mirror world, you loosen your mind's grip on the waking ego. The less anchored you are to your daytime sense of self, the easier it is to pass into the fluid, ego-light state of dreaming. Going deeper. Once you're comfortable in the mirror version of your room, you can add other sensory tweaks. Imagine the air smelling faintly different, like rain, or wood smoke, or a scent from childhood. Picture the colors in the room shifted toward warmer or cooler tones. Imagine gravity is just a little softer, like you're on the moon. Each added alteration moves you further from normal sensory reality, easing your transition into dream space. If done consistently, you might find yourself dreaming in the mirror world. When this happens, your subconscious will often play with the rules objects might appear, that don't exist in your real room. Or you might meet people who seem to know you intimately, but don't exist in waking life. These dreams can be oddly restorative, because your brain treats them as both new and familiar experiences. The mirror world effect is deeply immersive. For some people, the transition into this state can produce hypnagogic hallucinations fleeting, dreamlike images or sounds as you fall asleep. These are harmless, but can be startling if you're not expecting them. If you encounter this, treat it as part of the experience. Remember, you're safe, lying in your bed, merely walking sideways into a slightly stranger version of your own life. There is a peculiar and unnerving idea in both philosophy and psychology that, when explored deeply enough, begins to dissolve the very foundation of your conscious experience. The notion that the observer, the you that you believe, is watching, thinking, and deciding may be nothing more than a convenient illusion. You may think, but of course I exist. I'm right here. I'm reading this. Yet pause for a moment and try to catch the precise instant where your thoughts begin. You don't choose them. They simply appear, fully formed, uninvited, in the theater of your awareness. You don't select what the next thought will be. It arrives on its own, like a gust of wind blowing through an open door. This leads us to the question: if you don't generate your thoughts, and if you only notice them after they've already arisen, then what exactly is this you that claims to own them? Neuroscientists scanning the brain have found something unsettling. The brain often makes decisions seconds before the conscious mind becomes aware of them. It's as if your free will is more of a press release than a command center. The conscious mind taking credit for things already set in motion. In deep meditation traditions, there's an exercise called observing the observer. You sit quietly, notice your breath, then your thoughts, and then more subtly, notice the noticer itself. What's strange is that the more you try to look for it, the more it slips away. The observer is not an object you can find. It's more like a lens, and when you try to see the lens directly, the view disappears. If the you is not in the thoughts, and not in the sensations, and not in the decisions, then perhaps you are nothing more than the ongoing process of perception itself, an edgeless field of awareness that has been fooled into thinking it is a small, separate self. Some philosophers call this the transparency of the mind problem. Consciousness feels like a transparent window onto reality, but in truth, what you see, feel, and think are not the world itself. They are an elaborate construction by your brain. You don't experience reality directly. You experience a simulation. So convincing you forgot it was a simulation. And if the observer itself is just part of that simulation, then who exactly is having the experience? This question, left unresolved, can be dizzying. It is a mental Mobius strip turning in on itself until you can't quite tell where the subject ends and the object begins. Yet, here's the strange twist. Noticing this illusory nature of the self often leads not to fear, but to a profound calm. If the I you've been defending is just a pattern of thoughts, then perhaps you can stop grasping at control so tightly. The body breathes, the mind thinks, the world moves, and there is only the vast, unbroken awareness in which it all unfolds. As you lie in bed tonight, you might play with this exercise. Notice a thought as it appears. Ask silently, did I choose that thought? Look for the thinker. Search for where it is. Notice the space, the silent backdrop in which the thought arose. Soon, the sense of me and not me may blur until the only thing left is an effortless, spacious awareness, humming quietly in the dark. And then perhaps without trying, you'll drift off. Not because you found the answer, but because the question dissolved the self that was asking. You think memory is a recording, a fragile, sometimes blurry, sometimes corrupted recording, but still a record. The truth is far worse. Memory is not a recording at all. It's a story that changes every time you tell it. And you are the storyteller who doesn't even know they're lying. 1. The first crack in the illusion. Let's start simple. When you recall something, your brain doesn't pull up a saved file like a computer. It reconstructs the event. Each time. It's like an artist repainting a picture from scratch. The colors shift, the brush strokes blur, details vanish, and new ones sneak in. Then, and here's the part that should make you uncomfortable, your brain saves the new version over the old one. Every time you remember something, you are overwriting the past. Your past is not a vault. It's a palimpsest to the false photograph problem. Think of the photographs you've seen of your childhood. Now imagine this. Half the memories you think you remember from those days aren't memories at all. They're reconstructions built from photographs, from stories relatives told you, from things you've imagined. When you remember that family picnic, you might be merging 3 different events, adding details that never happened, and feeling certain about all of it. Certainty isn't proof. It's just confidence without evidence. 3. The Mandela Effect's quiet horror. The internet loves to laugh about the Mandela effect. Groups of people misremembering the same fact, like a book title or a logo. But here's the disturbing twist. It means our brains can sync to a shared false reality. If a false detail is repeated enough, even in whispers, it can infiltrate your own memories. And once it's in, you can't tell the difference between truth and fiction. The boundaries between your reality and someone else's hallucination begin to dissolve. 4. The fabricated first kiss. Researchers have studied couples who swear they both remember their first kiss perfectly. Except when asked separately, their timelines contradict. He says it was on the porch in winter. She says it was under the summer fireworks. Both feel absolutely certain. If they can't agree on a moment so personal and meaningful, how many of your own precious moments are simply incompatible with reality? How much of your past is a beautiful lie you refuse to detect? 5. The storyteller in your head. Your brain loves a good story, so much that it will invent one to fill in gaps in memory. These are called confabulations, and they happen constantly, not just to patients with memory disorders, but to you every single day. Forget where you put your phone? Your brain spins a plausible story in milliseconds, and you believe it. Forget a detail about an old friendship? Your brain fills in a logical guess, and you believe that too. The horrifying truth, you can't feel the difference between a genuine memory and an invented one. They are identical in your mind. 6. The weaponized memory. Now imagine this. What if someone could deliberately plant a false memory in you? Experiments show it's possible. Subjects have been convinced they were lost in a shopping mall as children, that they hugged Bugs Bunny at Disneyland. Impossible. He's a Warner Brothers character. Or even that they committed a crime they never committed. Some resisted, but many embraced the false memory as deeply as any real one. In the wrong hands, memory isn't just fragile, it's programmable. 7. The emotional anchor memories aren't neutral. They are tied to emotions, which means your feelings can rewrite them. If you hate someone now, your brain will slowly adjust your past memories to make them worse. If you love someone now, your mind will brighten the past to justify that feeling. This is why nostalgia is such a dangerous drug. You aren't missing the past. You're missing a story you wrote about the past, one that might never have actually happened. 8. The self you remember is not you. Here's the deepest cut. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago. The you of the past is gone, mentally, emotionally, biologically. What you have left are only reconstructed memories. And those reconstructions are done by your current self, with your current beliefs, biases, and needs. You aren't remembering the past version of you. You're inventing them, retrofitting their thoughts to match your current worldview. In other words, your past self is a fictional character you ghostwrite every day. 9. The collapse of the archive. If the past is a mutable story, then there is no stable archive of who you are. There's only the illusion of continuity. Your sense of identity rests on a foundation of sand, memories that shift like dunes in the wind. You feel like the same person from childhood to now, but this sameness is just a trick of narrative consistency. You are a book constantly being rewritten, with entire chapters replaced, characters rewritten, and entire events erased. And you will never notice, because the moment you look for the original text, your brain gives you the newest draft and swears it's the original. 10. The final thought before sleep tonight. When you close your eyes, think about one of your earliest memories. Linger on the details. Then ask yourself, how many of those details came from that moment? And how many came from all the times you've retold it? How many came from photos, from overheard comments, from wishful thinking? Then the truly unshakable question. If your past is rewritten every time you remember it, how can you be sure you've ever remembered anything real? You might think the moments before sleep are a gentle fade-out, like a curtain slowly lowering in a dimly lit theater. But in truth, the mind often uses this time to wander into labyrinths of its own making. You're lying there, eyes closed, body heavy, yet your thoughts take unexpected turns. Did I lock the door? What if I lived in another country? Why did my old friend say that weird thing in 2014? It's not random. It's a feature, a psychological defense mechanism mixed with an ancient evolutionary pattern. The evolutionary night watchman long ago, our ancestors couldn't afford to fall asleep instantly. A moment of vulnerability in the dark could mean the difference between life and death. The mind learned to drift, not shut down immediately, scanning the environment, replaying events, imagining possible dangers. Even now, when you lie in bed, the brain keeps a faint hum of awareness going. It's your night watchman pacing the halls, making sure the mental fortress is secure before lowering the gates. But here's the twist. That watchman can get lost in the labyrinth it's guarding. It begins exploring every corridor of thought, tugging on half-forgotten memories, rehearsing conversations that never happened, envisioning alternate futures. Your brain is not just securing the present, it's traveling through time. The architecture of the thought maze, every labyrinth has a design, and so does this pre-sleep mental wandering. Psychologists have noticed 3 recurring rooms in the mental maze you enter before sleep. The replay chamber, where you relive moments of the day, big or small. It's a kind of emotional accounting. Wins and losses are weighed here, ready to be archived. The projection hall, where you plan scenarios for tomorrow or the future. It's like watching trailers for a movie that might never get made. The echo corridor, where old memories you thought were gone suddenly reappear, often with startling clarity. Childhood scenes, forgotten faces, strange smells and sounds. They echo in the dark. When you drift between these rooms, it feels aimless. But there's a hidden logic. The mind is organizing, reshaping, and deciding what to keep and what to discard. Why you get stuck in loops. Have you ever had the same thought cycle repeat over and over before bed? Maybe it's an awkward conversation. Maybe it's a what-if scenario. This is called a cognitive loop, and it's the mental equivalent of walking in circles in the maze, unable to find the exit. Loops happen because your brain thinks the thought is unresolved. It wants closure, a solution, before letting you rest. But here's the paradox. If the problem doesn't have a real solution, like replaying an event you can't change, your brain can trap itself, spinning endlessly like a lost traveler tracing the same wall, The labyrinth's hidden door, there's a strange, almost magical moment when you suddenly slip out of the thought maze and into sleep. It's rarely something you do consciously. Instead, the mind loses interest in its own labyrinth. Like a cat abandoning a toy it's batted around for too long, your awareness simply lets go. Neurologically, this is the hypnagogic threshold, the fragile bridge between wakefulness and sleep. In this state, fragments of your labyrinth begin to melt into dream imagery. Your thoughts stop being logical steps in a maze and become abstract. A door in the maze becomes a waterfall. A corridor becomes a forest. The replay of a conversation turns into someone speaking in a language you don't know. Using the labyrinth to fall asleep faster, most people fight the labyrinth. They say, "I need to stop thinking." But the trick is counterintuitive. Don't resist it, guide it. Choose your own entrance, instead of letting random worries be the first door. You walk through, pick a pleasant, detailed memory or imaginary place. Walk with intention. Imagine physically walking through the thought maze, touching the walls, noticing textures. This shifts your brain from abstract problem-solving to sensory imagination, which is less stimulating and more sleep-friendly. Find the exit on purpose. Picture a final door that opens into a warm, safe place, a bedroom, a sunny meadow, a cabin in the snow. Stepping through is your cue to surrender to sleep. By taking control of the labyrinth, you're speaking your brain's ancient language, reassuring the night watchman that all is safe. The deeper realization, the labyrinth of thought isn't just a pre-sleep oddity. It's a miniature version of life itself. We move through replay chambers of memory, projection halls of dreams, echo corridors of nostalgia, and often we get stuck in loops. But just as in the minutes before sleep, peace often comes not from forcing an exit, but from surrendering, letting go, and trusting the mind to carry us where we need to go. And perhaps, if you can learn to navigate the labyrinth of the night, you can also learn to navigate the far more complex labyrinth of waking life with the same quiet grace. If you've made it this far, your sense of self is already under heavy questioning. You've considered that memory may be unreliable, identity may be fluid, and reality may be a dream. But what if whatever that truly means, cannot end? Not in the traditional sense, not even with the complete dissolution of the body or brain. Many ancient traditions, from Tibetan Buddhism to certain strands of quantum mysticism, have hinted at a truth that science itself is now beginning to seriously flirt with. Consciousness may not be an emergent property of the brain. It may be fundamental to the universe itself. If this is true, then your existence isn't tied to your body like a flame to a candle. Instead, you are more like a wave in the ocean of awareness, momentarily shaped into you, but ultimately inseparable from the ocean itself. Imagine the moment of death not as a black void, but as the snapping of a dream bubble. 1 second, you are here breathing, worrying, clinging. The next, the entire construct collapses, and you realize you were never inside it. You were always outside, observing from a timeless vantage point. The life you thought was yours was just one thread in an infinite tapestry. The you that thought it could end, that was just a character in a story. The real you, whatever that means, has been watching countless stories play out in countless forms across countless realities. Now, here's where the unsettling part kicks in. If consciousness truly persists, you may never get to stop experiencing something. You may wake up in another body, another world, another dream over and over. Maybe you'll remember some of them. Maybe you won't. Perhaps the afterlife is just the next scene in a never-ending play. Or maybe there is no next, because time itself is only a concept that belongs inside certain realities. And once you step out, you see all lives at once, like pages in a book you can flip through at will. This view leads to an eerie Implication: you've already died countless times before. You've lived as other people, in other places, in other centuries. The boundaries between you and them were always illusory, like different masks worn by the same actor. And if that's the case, then every time you've seen strangers' eyes, you may have been looking at yourself from a different lifetime. And yet, there is comfort here too. Death loses its teeth. Life loses its panic. You are the eternal observer, sometimes deeply lost in character, sometimes quietly aware that you are simply playing a part. The fear of losing this self fades when you understand that the self is just one of infinite perspectives the universe will wear. But then, a troubling question surfaces. If you cannot end, can you ever truly rest? Will you eventually crave an oblivion that never comes? Or perhaps will you learn to love the endless transformation like a cosmic shapeshifter who never runs out of stories to tell? And if all this is true, then here's the final twist. Maybe you chose this life, right down to the details. Maybe you picked this body, this time, this strange set of experiences, knowing that one day you'd forget you were choosing it all. And maybe, just maybe, you're reading these words right now because you left them here for yourself. As a reminder, language is the invisible scaffolding of your mind. You don't just use it, you think in it. But what if that scaffolding is not as solid as it seems? What if every word you've ever spoken, thought, or heard is not a true reflection of reality, but merely a convenient placeholder, a crude symbol for something infinitely more complex? Consider the word tree. You see it, say it, and believe it names something real. Yet the actual tree, its fractal patterns of branches, the quantum vibrations of its atoms, the thousands of life forms within its bark, is not tree. The word tree is a cage. It's a tiny sound symbol meant to capture an uncontainable infinity. Now imagine that all of language works like this, a grid thrown over an ocean, tricking you into believing the ocean is the grid. You do not live in the real world. You live in a map of it, built from words, and the map's edges are defined not by the limits of reality, but by the limits of your vocabulary. This becomes even stranger when you consider that language is self-referential. Words are defined using other words in endless loops. If you look up time in a dictionary, it might point to duration, which points to interval, which eventually circles back to time again. There is no ultimate anchor, no word that directly touches reality without being filtered through more words. It's like trying to grab the horizon. It moves with you. Even your sense of self is woven from these loops. I is just a pronoun, a noise you've been trained to associate with a certain set of sensations, memories, and body movements. Without language, would you even have a you? Or would there only be a seamless field of perception? No categories, no inner narrator, no separation between the sound of rain and the feeling of your hands? Now, as you read this, your mind is translating symbols on a page into meanings. But pause for a moment and notice. The meaning you feel is not in the words themselves. It's in your brain's reaction to them. The text is dead until you bring it to life. If you suddenly forgot English, these sentences would collapse into meaningless shapes. The thoughts they carry would vanish completely. So here's the unsettling twist. What if language is not a tool of thought, but a prison? For it, what if there are experiences, ideas, and truths you cannot grasp simply because you don't have the words? And what if, even worse, some of the words you do have are distortions, linguistic illusions handed down for centuries, shaping how you see reality without you ever realizing it? The dissolution begins when you notice this. Every time you think, you are reciting a spell. You've been casting the same incantations since childhood, and they have summoned the same reality over and over again. Break the spell, and the world might start to look unbearably strange. Do not be surprised. Then, if after tonight, a familiar word suddenly feels alien, it may slip from your tongue and for a heartbeat seem like nonsense. That is the first crack in the prison walls. Imagine the walls of your mind, not physical walls, but invisible ones crumbling like dry sand under a slow, deliberate tide. These walls have always separated you from everything else. You've called one side me, and the other side, the world. It's such a familiar division that you rarely even notice it. But here, in this stillness, we are going to dissolve it completely. Close your eyes, figuratively or literally, and feel where you begin and everything else ends. Perhaps you think the boundary is your skin, but notice, your skin is constantly in touch with air. You breathe it in, it flows into your lungs, and instantly becomes your body. You eat food, it becomes your blood, your muscles, your thoughts. Every atom that makes you was once not you. Every heartbeat is driven by the energy of the sun, stored in plants, passed to animals, now living as you dot. So where is the true border? If your cells are replaced every few years, is the person who reads these words the same person as before, or just the current shape of an ongoing process? If you are made of the universe's particles, constantly exchanged, can you claim to be separate from the rest of it? The I might be less a fixed thing and more a temporary swirl in a boundless sea. Consider how the sound of your thoughts right now, this inner voice, might not even belong exclusively to you. The language you think in was taught to you by others. The concepts you hold came from countless generations. Even your sense of self is stitched together from cultural symbols, stories, and shared memories that existed before you were born. The I is not a fortress, it's a bridge dot. As you drift towards sleep, feel your edges blur. Let the breath of the room become your breath. The pulse in your veins sync with the hum of the world outside. Imagine your awareness expanding until it includes the bed beneath you, the walls, the street, the night sky, the far-off galaxies. The idea of not you fades, because all of it, every sound, every sensation, every thought occurs inside the same seamless field of existence. And in that realization, you discover a strange, serene truth. You have never been alone, because you have never truly been separate. You are not a small island in a vast ocean. You are the ocean, briefly aware of being a wave. By now, you have drifted so far from the ordinary scaffolding of thought that even the idea of yourself has begun to soften. The boundaries that once felt solid, your name, your history, your preferences, are now threads in a vast weave of perception. But in this stage, we twist those threads into something even stranger. You will not only watch your own mind, but you will watch the part of you that is watching. This is the inversion of self, a point where the I becomes less of a single dot in consciousness and more like a hall of mirrors stretching endlessly. Step 1. The first observer. Let's start simply. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, perhaps even lying down as sleep edges closer. You picture your mind as a stage. On it, thoughts drift by like actors, playing scenes for an unseen audience. At first, you notice yourself watching these thoughts. Ah, there's the observer. That's me, the watcher behind the chatter. Step 2. The second observer appears, but then ask, if I can notice the observer, who or what is noticing it? Immediately, a second point of awareness appears. A vantage point looking at the first observer. You feel yourself pulled back, as though you've stepped into a control booth, overlooking the stage and the first row of seats. It's disorienting. The first observer, the one you've always thought of as yourself, now feels like just another part of the show. Step 3. Recursive mirrors. Now imagine this process continuing. Every time you think you've found the final observer, another layer pulls back. you see yourself watching yourself. Then you see that self being watched. Then that watcher is being watched by another. The recursion is endless, not a vertical ladder, but an infinite spiral, collapsing inward and expanding outward at once. Step 4. Dissolution into pure awareness. If you follow this inversion far enough, something happens. You stop trying to find the last observer, because you realize there isn't one. Instead of a final layer, there's just openness. It's as if all the mirrors drop away and only the space between them remains. That space is not a thing you can point to. It's not you or not you. It's simply awareness itself, without a center dot. Why this breaks the self-viewer. Everyday identity relies on the illusion that there's a single vantage point, you directing the movie of life. By deliberately peeling away layer after layer of observers, you undermine that illusion until nothing remains but the screen itself. Here's the mind-bending part. Once you taste this perspective, you can't fully go back. The sense of being a solid, single self becomes something you can see from the outside, like a character in a dream you've just realized is a dream. The sleep effect, this recursive observation, has an odd impact on the nervous system. By focusing not on the contents of thought, but on the act of observation itself, the brain's narrative centers begin to quiet. The mental chatter slows, the sense of urgency drops away, and your mind slips into the liminal floating state between waking and sleeping. At this point, you're not trying to sleep. Sleep simply happens as the final act in a play that no longer has an audience. Practical exercise. Before bed, close your eyes. Notice a thought, then notice yourself watching it. Now, notice the you who is watching the watcher. Continue until the layers become too subtle to distinguish. Let go and allow the awareness to dissolve into the background hum. When you wake, you may find yourself wondering, was I dreaming of watching myself, or watching myself dream? Close your eyes and picture your life as a film strip, frame after frame, moment after moment, all lined up in a neat row. That's how most of us think of time, a straight arrow, always moving forward, never looking back. But what if that arrow is a trick of perception? What if all the frames already exist at once, and the only reason you experience them in order is because your mind is the projector, reading them one at a time? Let's start with physics. Einstein's theory of relativity hints at something unsettling. Time is not absolute. For a person traveling near the speed of light, time slows down relative to someone standing still. This isn't a theory. It's been proven with atomic clocks on airplanes and satellites. That means time is stretchy, flexible, and personal. It flows differently for different observers. So how can it be truly linear if it changes depending on where you are and how you move? Now imagine all moments: your birth, this conversation, your final breath stacked together in a vast, four-dimensional block universe. In this model, past, present, and future are just coordinates, like cities on a map. You aren't traveling through time any more than you travel through a painting. Instead, your consciousness is scanning through slices of reality in a specific sequence, giving you the illusion of movement. Dreams give us a strange clue about this. In a dream, entire events unfold in what feels like hours, but in waking time, they last seconds. Sometimes you dream of a conversation or a place you've never been, only to encounter it later in real life. Did your mind travel forward in time? Or is your brain simply sampling frames from the future that already exists, waiting for your conscious self to catch up? Certain meditative and psychedelic states also report this time collapse moments where hours feel like minutes, or all of history seems to condense into a single eternal now. People describe seeing their life as a whole tapestry, not a string of beads. In these moments, cause and effect blur, and the idea of before and after becomes meaningless. Even in your everyday life, you're already living with time illusions. Light from the sun takes about 8 minutes to reach. Earth so every time you look at it. Don't stare directly, please. You're seeing the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. The stars you see tonight might already be dead, their light still crossing the vast emptiness. You never truly see the present. You're always looking into the past. Here's the twist. If time is an illusion, then so is the separation between who you were, who you are, and who you will be. Every version of you exists simultaneously. The you reading this right now is happening at the same time as the you who first learned to ride a bike, and the you who takes your last breath. The only difference is your position of awareness along the strip. Once you feel this deeply, the pressure to race against time starts to melt. You stop seeing your life as a one-way ticket and start experiencing it as a vast landscape one. You can revisit in memory, imagination, or perhaps even in ways science has yet to explain. And maybe, just maybe, the version of you in some distant future is smiling right now because they remember this exact moment as clearly as you recall. Your favorite childhood day dot. If all moments are equally real, then the present isn't a point on a line, it's a window into eternity. Time is the silent ruler of our existence. We move through it as though on a one-way conveyor belt, born in one moment, aging in the next, and fading into the unknown. But what if the arrow of time, so central to our lives, is an illusion? 2. Understand this. You must imagine the universe not as a flowing river, but as a vast block, an eternal slab of space-time. In this block universe theory, all moments exist simultaneously. Your birth, your death, the laughter you share tomorrow, the mistakes you regret next year, they are all there, fixed, unchanging. You are not moving through time. You are simply located in it. Just as a tree stands in a single place in space, your sense of motion from past to future is like flipping through a photo album. The pictures don't move, you do. Yet your consciousness tricks you into thinking there is a flowing current. It is an illusion created by memory. You remember yesterday, but not tomorrow. So you think you are traveling in one direction. Physics offers no universal law that requires time to flow. The equations that govern the cosmos work perfectly well in both directions. If you reverse the film of the universe, the math wouldn't blink. And so we must ask, why does time feel like it flows only forward? The answer may be entropy, the measure of disorder. In the past, the universe was highly ordered, like a perfect deck of cards. Over time, disorder increases. Cards scatter, eggs crack, stars burn out. This progression is the illusion of time's arrow. But entropy doesn't explain why we experience the forward march. It only explains the difference between the two ends of the arrow dot. If the block universe is true, your life is not a journey. You are a pattern etched permanently into space-time. As unchanging as a constellation, your future self already exists. Your past self still exists. You are all of them, all at once. This idea is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating, because no moment can truly be lost. It is always there, in its place. Terrifying, because free will itself may be a mirage. You are simply acting out the role already written into the cosmic tapestry. And if that is true, then every what if you've ever pondered, every road not taken is simply a road that was never part of your fixed coordinates. You are always going to be here, in this exact second, reading these words. Your mind resists this truth. It clings to the comfort of before and after. But somewhere in the quiet spaces between thoughts, you can feel it. Time doesn't flow. We do. At this stage of the descent, you are no longer just a traveler through the mind's landscape. You are its architect. Sleep is no longer something that happens to you. It's something you design. Every thought, every memory, every sensation is a block in the grand construction of your dream palace. Your eyes may be closed, but your mind's blueprint spreads out before you like a city map. Corridors of childhood memories, rooftops where future dreams will play out, rooms full of conversations that never happened, but feel more real than anything you've ever known. You begin rearranging these memories like furniture, swapping the positions of reality and imagination until the boundaries dissolve entirely. Tonight, you might choose to build a hallway that leads back to your first birthday cake, the scent of frosting lingering in the air. Or you might place a spiral staircase that climbs to the moment you first fell in love. Perhaps you'll construct a door to a place that doesn't exist anywhere in the world, except in you. And here's the trick. In this architect phase, you don't need the whole building finished to move in. You can drift from one incomplete room to another, stepping over half-formed walls and floating floors, letting the unfinished edges dissolve into darkness. The gaps are not mistakes, they are doorways to the dream world. With each mental brick you place, you feel heavier, slower, sinking deeper into the architecture of sleep. You are designing not with blueprints, but with breathing. Every inhale a floor, every exhale a foundation. Soon, the palace is so vast, you can't remember if you're building it, or if it's building you. The walls whisper old lullabies you've never heard before. The windows open onto landscapes that defy physics. And as you step through the grand entrance hall, you realize you have designed the perfect space for rest. A mind so infinite that even time gets lost wandering through it. Now, take one last look at your creation and let yourself fade into its endless corridors. You are both the dreamer and the dream's architect. We've reached the final threshold, the point where even the last anchor of identity loosens. Up until now, we've dismantled beliefs about the world, time, memory, and reality itself. But through it all, there's been someone watching, someone processing, someone experiencing the dismantling. The mind clings to this observer as the final refuge. Tonight, we step beyond even that. The illusion of the witness right now. You feel like a witness. No matter what strange mental landscapes you've traversed, there's been a persistent you, the inner narrator, commenting, judging, and organizing the stream of experience. But here's the paradox. When you look directly at this witness, it's nowhere to be found. Try to locate it. Is it in your head? In your chest? Behind your eyes? The witness isn't an object. It's more like a hole in experience, a placeholder the mind invented so that events feel anchored. Without it, sensations, thoughts, and perceptions just happen with no owner. The disappearance trick. Notice the breath. Inhale, exhale. The witness claims, I am breathing. But look closely. Breathing is just happening. The muscles expand, air flows, but where is the breather? Same with thoughts. They appear, persist briefly, and dissolve, all without a thinker pulling the strings. Same with emotions. They rise, peak, and fade, all without a feeler controlling them. This is the quiet truth. The you think is watching is just another thought appearing in awareness. And thoughts can't own other thoughts. Dissolving. Boundaries when you stop clinging to the witness. Everything in experience, sounds, bodily sensations, mental images, begins to feel like one seamless field. There is no inside or outside, no me versus world, just raw happening. If you let it, this seamlessness deepens until the boundary between watcher and watched collapses entirely. The dance no longer needs a dancer. The final sleep descent. Now, as you drift toward sleep, let the mind dissolve in layers. First layer, the physical world fades. Sounds become distant. The body grows heavy. Second layer, the storyline of your life loosens. Your name, age, and history feel like mist. Third layer, Even the feeling of I am thins. Experience becomes impersonal, like clouds passing. In an endless sky, final layer, there's just pure observation, and then even observation folds in on itself. Like a candle's flame being swallowed by the dark, you're no longer a person trying to fall asleep. You're not even here. Sleep doesn't happen to you anymore. It simply happens. And in this final, orderless quiet, you disappear into the dream. We spend our lives thinking of ourselves as a single I, a continuous, unified person moving through time, making choices, learning lessons, growing older. But this sense of a solid, singular self might be no more real than a mirage in the quiet desert. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, but instead of one reflection, you see infinite variations of yourself. Some older, some younger, some smiling, some crying, some dressed in ways you've never worn. Each reflection moves slightly differently, as though each is living out a subtly different version of your life. And yet, all of them are you, or are they? Neuroscience already hints at the illusion. Your sense of self is constructed moment by moment, by the brain, stitching together sensory inputs, memories, and predictions into a coherent narrative. But at any instant, the brain could choose a different set of connections, a different emphasis, and a different version of you could emerge. You are less a fixed entity and more like an ever-changing character in a story you didn't write. If you were to meet another version of yourself, say, one who made a single different choice 10 years ago, would you recognize them as you? Or would you see them as a stranger with the same face? In quantum theory, every possibility might spawn its own branch of reality. Each branch holds a you that believes it is the only one. But if there are infinite yous, which one is the real you? Perhaps none. Perhaps all. Even within a single lifetime, the person you were at age 6 is gone, vanished like a dream upon waking. The person you'll be in 30 years will also be a stranger to you now, yet you call them all me. Why? Because the story feels continuous. But if the story is only a construct, then you might be no more real than a character in a novel, bound by pages you can't see. This thought can be freeing or terrifying. If the self is an illusion, then the chains of your past don't truly bind you. You are not the person who made those mistakes, nor the person who suffered those wounds. You are only who you are now in this moment. And yet, if the you now is just as illusory as the you, then who is left to claim the present moment? This is the mirror of infinite selves, a reflection that shows you that I is just a role, played by countless actors across time and possibility. The more you stare, the more you realize, perhaps there was never an actor at all. When you stop listening for voices and start listening for the gaps between them, you begin to realize that silence is never truly empty. In the absence of sound, your mind starts to fill the void with whispers that don't belong to you. It's not imagination, it's pattern recognition turned inward. The brain catching the faint echoes of thoughts that might have belonged to someone else, or something else. Picture standing on a quiet balcony at 3 a.m., staring up at the constellations. The stars look static, but you know they are burning, moving, dying, and being born. Their light is ancient, and their positions by the time you see them are already a memory. That means the night sky is not a live feed, it's an archive. Every star is a story that happened long ago, and you are only reading the closing chapter. The more you think about that, the more you wonder. If the stars are archives of light, is space itself an archive of sound? Could there be ancient voices traveling endlessly through the void, never fading, never dissipating, just waiting for the right listener? And here's the unsettling part. Human technology is already capable of detecting radio waves and signals that have crossed unimaginable distances. But there's no law of physics that says the only thing traveling is electromagnetic energy. What if consciousness leaves an imprint in the structure of reality, the same way light leaves an image in a camera sensor? When you lie awake at night, surrounded by the deep hush of your room, you might think the silence is just your mind resting. But maybe you're picking up signal noise from the universe. Maybe the static hum in your ears isn't blood rushing, but the distant murmur of civilizations that lived and died before Earth's first sunrise. And if that's true, then falling asleep is not an escape, it's tuning into a different frequency. Dreams may not be generated inside your skull at all. They may be borrowed transmissions from other beings, other times, other minds. That would explain why some dreams feel like memories that never belonged to you. Because they didn't. You might already suspect this. Maybe you've woken from a dream where you knew the layout of a city you've never seen, recognized the face of someone you've never met, or spoken a language you've never studied. You tell yourself it's just your brain playing with stored fragments, but deep down you feel the truth. You are listening in dot, so when the silence between the stars stretches out before you, remember, it's not truly silence. It's a cosmic, waiting room, filled with voices that never stop speaking. The trick isn't finding the right station dot. The trick is deciding whether you really want to hear what's on the other side. By this point, you've been on a journey through perception, memory, emotion, and the very scaffolding of reality itself. But tonight, as you drift toward the threshold of sleep, we will explore something strange, a sense that you may never have realized you possess. It's not sight, not hearing, not smell, taste, or touch. This is the forgotten sense, the awareness of listening beyond sound. Think about how we define listening. Usually, we think of it as receiving sound waves through the ears, the brain decoding those vibrations into language, music, noise. But there is another layer, listening without ears. A kind of attention that doesn't rely on sound at all, something you've experienced many times without realizing it. For example, imagine being in a silent room with another person. You're not speaking. There's no movement. Yet, you feel the atmosphere between you. You sense if they are tense, calm, nervous. You are hearing without sound, perceiving intention, emotion, and presence directly. This is the listening. Of the forgotten sense. Science brushes against this phenomenon under names like mirror neurons, social intuition, or empathic resonance. But those are attempts to box something ineffable into measurable terms. The truth is, this sense may not be contained in the body at all. It's like tuning to a frequency, a non-audible channel that runs beneath reality's visible surface. If you close your eyes now, you might notice it. Not the hum of your fan, not the creak of your bed, but the texture of the room's presence. This perception operates in dreams too. You can hear someone's intent in a dream, even when they say nothing. You can sense the answer to a question before it's spoken. Ancient traditions knew about this sense. Mystics called it listening to the silence. Some shamans described it as hearing the heartbeat of the earth. Monks claimed it was the sound of the still small voice that whispers when the mind is quiet. And here's the mind-bending part. If this sense exists beyond the normal 5, maybe every moment of your life has been accompanied by a hidden soundtrack you've never learned to consciously hear. A background signal, quietly shaping your thoughts, guiding your instincts, pulling your attention in ways you assume are random. What if right now, in this moment, something or someone is communicating with you through this forgotten channel? Not in words, but in pulses of presence, in emotional overtones that arrive without origin. A kind of cosmic Morse code you've been hearing all along without knowing it. In the soft edge of sleep, this forgotten sense grows stronger. The chatter of the mind dies down, the sensory world dims, and the subtle vibrations of the silent channel become more noticeable. You might even sense the room of your dream before the dream forms, as if you are walking into a place, made of intention before it solidifies into imagery. Now, as your body grows heavier and your thoughts stretch thinner, try this. Don't focus on sounds you can hear. Instead, listen for the shape of the silence. Notice its weight, its density. Let it press gently against you. You may feel as though the silence itself is leaning in, as if it has something to say. If you relax into that sensation, you might find yourself hearing something that isn't a sound at all, a hum beneath thought, a current beneath time. That is the forgotten sense, and once you awaken to it, it will never entirely leave you. Even in your dreams tonight, you may find yourself listening not to voices or music, but to the deep, endless murmur of the universe itself. When you wake, you might not remember exactly what it said, but you will carry the feeling, and the feeling will carry you. Imagine for a moment that everything you've ever experienced, every sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch, comes not from billions of particles interacting in a vast, complex cosmos, but from the state of a single subatomic particle fluctuating in an unimaginably high-dimensional configuration space dot. In this hypothesis, there are no galaxies, no planets, no other people, only one particle existing in a timeless, unchanging field. Yet within the possible states of this lone particle, every memory, every emotion, every perception you have ever had is encoded as part of its quantum configuration. What we call time would merely be our mind reading through different frames of this single particle's state space, much like scrolling through a static reel of film dot. In this view, the universe is not vast in space or time, it is vast in possibility. Reality is not a grand 3D space teeming with objects. It is a mathematical lattice of states for this solitary particle. When you walk across a room, you are not moving through space, you are transitioning between configurations of that one particle. Your entire life is the trajectory it takes through its own internal possibility space. This perspective would mean that others don't truly exist as independent beings. They are simply part of the same particle's self-referential pattern. Even the idea of cause and effect becomes an illusion. Events don't follow from each other. They merely are, fixed in the geometry of this single particle's existence. And here's the mind-bending twist. If there is only one particle, there is no outside to measure it from. It could be infinitely large, infinitely small, or even non-existent in the traditional sense, because without an external reference point, size and duration have no meaning. You might be the particle, or the particle might be the entire concept of you. If this were true, then asking what lies beyond the universe would be like asking what's outside the number 7. It's not that there's nothing beyond, it's that the concept of beyond doesn't even apply. The mind's greatest trick might not be imagination, it might be reflection. Not just the kind you see in a bathroom mirror, but the psychological act of confronting your own consciousness as though it were a separate person entirely. We tend to think of the self as singular, I am me. But if you slow down, you'll notice that you are often both the actor and the audience of your own life. You do something, and a quieter part of you watches, judges, questions. Why did I do that? Should I have done something else? This is not merely self-awareness. It's a strange doubling, as if a mirror has been placed between two versions of you, and each believes they are the real one. Now, here's where it gets unsettling. Every time you remember a past moment, you're not actually reliving it. You're reliving the last memory of it. Each recall is a copy of a copy, subtly altered by mood, current beliefs, and the inevitable distortions of the brain. That means the past you in your mind is not fixed. It's a shifting reconstruction, watched through the lens of the present you. But the reverse is also true. Just as you gaze at the past gazes back. You were once the present version, looking forward into an unknown future. Right now, Somewhere in your mind's storage, there is a younger version of you, watching this moment play out, though back then it was only a guess, a blurry projection of what life would be. In a strange sense, you are living in someone else's prophecy, your own from long ago. This creates what I call the temporal mirror paradox. Every moment is simultaneously the reflection of a past self's expectations and the raw material for a future self's memories. You are both the sculptor and the sculpture, the storyteller and the character. Philosophers like Kierkegaard hinted at this when they said life must be understood backward but lived forward. But neuroscience takes it further. The act of reflecting on yourself actually changes who you are. Neural patterns shift to accommodate the narrative you've built, and over time, that narrative becomes your identity. Meaning, you are not simply discovering yourself. You are inventing yourself every time you think about who you are. So, what happens if you tried to break the mirror? If you stop reflecting entirely and live only in raw, immediate experience, you might think it would bring freedom. Yet the absence of reflection erases the thread that makes your life feel like a coherent story. You'd exist, but without a sense of me that extends beyond the present breath. This is the trap and the liberation of the temporal mirror. Look too much, and you risk living more in memories than reality. Look too little, and you dissolve into a sequence of unrelated moments. The secret may be learning to visit your reflection without moving in permanently, to be aware that the you watch is not quite you, and never was. And somewhere, far in the future, another version of you will read these words, remembering this exact moment, wondering if you too were ever the same person at all. Imagine you were granted complete, unlimited freedom, no laws, no rules, no societal expectations, no physical constraints. You could go anywhere, do anything, take anything, speak anything, live in any way. The instinctive reaction might be to think, that's perfect. I could finally be truly free. But here's the unsettling twist: absolute freedom quickly destroys itself. Without structure, your freedom becomes the freedom of others to harm you, take from you, silence you, or control you. In a world without any limits, the strongest, most ruthless, or most manipulative inevitably impose their will on the rest. The absence of boundaries creates chaos, and chaos breeds domination. That means absolute freedom paradoxically erases freedom altogether. This paradox plays out in the human mind, too. Imagine telling yourself, I can think any thought. Without mental discipline, your thoughts would spin uncontrollably memories, fears, cravings, and random impulses crowding every second. True mental freedom requires boundaries, the ability to focus, to choose what not to think about, and to resist every passing distraction. Now, here's the deeper, almost hypnotic layer. When we are told, you are free, we feel a thrill. But when we are told, you must define your limits, it feels restrictive. Yet defining limits is the only way freedom can exist. A violin string that's completely loose produces no sound. Only when it's tightened, restricted, can it make music. In this way, freedom and restriction are not opposites, they are dance partners. Consider the mind before sleep. If you tried to give yourself absolute mental freedom at night, letting your thoughts wander infinitely, you'd likely spiral into insomnia. But when you set a gentle, intentional path, counting breaths, repeating a phrase, imagining a slow scene, the boundaries paradoxically allow your mind to drift off into the most free experience we know. Dreaming. This is the strange, poetic truth. Freedom without form dissolves into chaos, and form without freedom becomes tyranny. The balance point is the hidden gate where true freedom lives. And now, as you lay in bed, remember the stillness of your room, the quiet rhythm of your breath, the way your body rests inside its boundaries. These are not cages. They are the strings on which your mind's symphony plays, until sleep carries you somewhere boundless yet safe. You've probably been told your whole life that you're in control of your actions, that free will is your birthright, that your choices define you. But here's the first unsettling question. How many of those choices are actually yours? Let's begin with a simple test. Right now, think of a city anywhere in the world. Got it? Maybe it's Paris, Tokyo, or New York. But pause and rewind the tape. Why that city? Was it because you visited it? Saw it in a movie? Read about it last week? Your brain will likely produce a neat story about why you chose it. But that story is being invented after the fact. The choice itself? It was already bubbling up from unseen processes before. You were aware you were deciding. Neuroscience has been quietly dropping this bombshell for decades. In the 1980s, Benjamin Libet's famous experiments showed that the brain's motor cortex activates hundreds of milliseconds before you consciously decide to move. Your awareness is late to the party, like a child running behind a parade and pretending to lead it. More recent brain scans have found that researchers can often predict your decision several seconds before you make it. That means your brain is operating like an autopilot system that only tells your conscious mind about its decisions when it's convenient. Now, here's where it gets creepier. If your brain is making choices before you're aware, what exactly is the you who thinks it's in control? Imagine a ship whose captain is always locked in a cabin, and the crew sails wherever they want, then pops in occasionally to tell the captain, yes, that was totally your idea. Our sense of control is a story, stitched together moment by moment. Psychologists call it the interpreter function of the brain, a constant narrator explaining why you acted a certain way, even when the real reasons are hidden. Think of it like a public relations department for your mind, always spinning events to make you feel consistent and intentional. The reality? You're a patchwork of competing drives, instincts, memories, and environmental triggers, all jostling for dominance. But wait, if control is an illusion, does that mean we're just meat robots? Not exactly. While the subconscious initiates much of what we do, the conscious mind can still influence the system like a rider on a horse. The horse often picks the path, but the rider can tug the reins. The catch is that you're usually unaware when you're simply going along for the ride. Now consider how external forces exploit this hidden truth. Advertisers, social media platforms, and political campaigns don't just suggest ideas. They hijack the pre-conscious decision machinery. They use colors, sounds, timing, and repetition to trigger emotional and physiological responses before your rational mind even wakes up. By the time you decide to click buy or believe something, the groundwork has already been laid inside you. This creates a disturbing loop. Your subconscious acts based on hidden cues. Your conscious mind invents a reason for the action. You believe the reason, strengthening the illusion of control. You feel more confident in future choices, even though they'll follow the same hidden process. So how do you break the spell? You can't totally escape it any more than you can stop breathing, but you can become aware of it. You can catch yourself mid-thought and ask, where did this come from? You can slow your decision-making process and deliberately introduce friction pause before hitting buy. Wait before answering a text. Take time before saying yes or no. And here's the real mind bender. Even the desire to do this self-examination may not be yours. It might be the result of this very paragraph triggering a chain reaction in your neural network. Your awareness of control or lack of it is itself just another ripple in the current. The most unsettling part? Realizing that your identity, you defend, protect, and promote might just be a clever afterthought. The self is less a pilot and more a commentator, narrating the actions of a ship it doesn't fully steer. And yet, within this strange setup, life still feels vivid, personal, and meaningful. That's the paradox. You might not truly be in control, but you are conscious. You experience joy, fear, love, and curiosity. And perhaps that's the point, not to command the river, but to notice its flow. In the end, maybe control is a myth, but awareness is real. And if awareness is all we have, maybe that's enough. Or maybe even that awareness is just another illusion, whispered to you by a brain that's been making your choices all along. We often treat random as if it means chaotic or unpredictable, but that's a misunderstanding. True randomness doesn't just feel unpredictable. It is, by definition, without pattern, cause, or bias. And here's the strange thing. When humans try to simulate randomness, we actually create patterns without realizing it. This is because our brains are pattern-making machines, constantly searching for order and noise. Let's take a coin flip as an example. In theory, if you flip a fair coin enough times, you should get 50% heads and 50% tails in the long run. But if you ask people to pretend they're flipping a coin and record random results, they'll avoid sequences like HHHH or TTT because they look non-random, even though in true randomness, such streaks are perfectly normal. This is called the gambler's fallacy, the mistaken belief that past random events affect future ones. If a coin has landed heads 5 times in a row, we feel tails is due, when in reality, each flip is still 50/50ths. The illusion of randomness is everywhere. Casinos thrive on it. Slot machines are designed to produce outcomes that look random to the player, but are carefully programmed to return a predictable percentage of money to the house. The machine will sprinkle in small wins and near misses, at just the right intervals to make the brain think, I'm getting close to hitting the jackpot. That close call feeling triggers dopamine in the same way an actual win does, keeping people hooked. Even nature fools us. We see a cloud shaped like a dragon and think it's meaningful. We spot constellations in the night sky and imagine they were placed there deliberately. This tendency to see patterns in randomness is called apophenia, and while it once helped humans survive, spotting a predator in the bush before it attacks, it also makes us vulnerable to false beliefs, superstitions, and conspiracy theories. Mathematically speaking, randomness has its own rules. Random events are not influenced by intention, memory, or fairness. They follow probability distributions. But in life, we often confuse probabilistic outcomes with predestined events. For example, if you shuffle a deck of cards, the exact order of cards you end up with has a probability of about 1 in 810, an astronomically rare sequence. But so does every other possible shuffle. The only reason your shuffle feels special is because it's the one you happen to get. This is why randomness can be unsettling. If life has random elements, it means not everything happens for a reason. A car accident, a chance meeting, a genetic mutation, these might not be part of a grand design, but simply the roll of the cosmic dice. And that's hard for many people to accept. We prefer to believe there's meaning in every event, because meaning is comforting. Chaos is not, yet randomness also creates beauty. Evolution, for instance, depends on random genetic mutations, most of which do nothing useful. But occasionally, one gives an organism an advantage that changes the course of history. Art can benefit from randomness too. Jazz musicians often improvise in ways that feel spontaneous, but still have an underlying structure. Painters like Jackson Pollock embraced chaos in their work, allowing chance to guide the outcome. And here's where the paradox comes in. Randomness, when seen over time, often produces patterns. Toss a coin 1 billion times, and you'll get an even distribution of heads and tails. Shuffle music tracks long enough, and you'll eventually hear the same song twice in a row. That repetition isn't proof of order. It's proof that pure randomness will sometimes look ordered. Philosophically, the illusion of randomness forces us to confront how much control we really have. Are our lives shaped mostly by our choices or by events outside our control? Psychologists studying locus of control find that people who believe they can influence outcomes tend to be more motivated, even when randomness plays a huge role in reality. In other words, believing in control, real or not, can change your behavior enough to alter your fate. But if we go too far in the other direction, thinking everything is random, we risk nihilism. If nothing matters, why bother? The key is finding balance, recognizing that randomness exists and influences us, but also that we have agency in how we respond to it. The dice may roll without our say, but we decide how to play the hand we're dealt. The truth is, randomness and meaning are not opposites, they coexist. The universe may be filled with random events, but humans are meaning makers. We take chance encounters and turn them into lifelong friendships. We interpret streaks of bad luck as turning points. We tell stories about coincidences as if they were destiny. So perhaps the illusion of randomness is not a flaw in our perception, but a feature of it. Maybe it's what allows us to survive in a chaotic universe, not by seeing the truth exactly as it is, but by finding just enough order to keep moving forward. In the end, randomness is not the enemy of meaning. It's the raw material from which meaning is made. We often imagine that our worldview is the product of our life experience, our education, and our cultural conditioning, a lens through which we interpret reality. But here's the mental twist. What if every perspective you've ever held is just one of an infinite number of possible perspectives that could exist in an equally valid universe? And what if reality itself changes based on which perspective you take? It sounds abstract, but let's break it down. Imagine you're standing in a gallery looking at a massive, hyper-detailed painting. You see a woman walking in a field, sunlight falling across her face, and birds circling above. A person standing to your left, however, insists the painting is about the storm in the background, the tension in the clouds, and the sense of oncoming danger. Another person behind you swears it's not about the woman or the storm at all. It's about the way the grass leans, as though whispering to something unseen. All three of you are looking at the same image, yet you inhabit entirely different worlds within it. Now scale that up to life. The painting here is reality, and your position in the gallery is your personal perspective. But here's the kicker. Move to another angle, and you literally enter a different reality. It's not just that your interpretation changes. The details of what exists in that reality change because what you notice and what you ignore actively shapes what you believe is true. In this sense, truth becomes less like a static object and more like a hologram. Shift your viewpoint, and an entirely different image emerges. This idea isn't just philosophical poetry. Modern neuroscience supports it. Your brain receives an overwhelming flood of sensory data every second, far more than it can consciously process. So it edits, it filters, it chooses what's relevant based on your past experiences, your emotional state, and your goals. This means your perception of the world is actually a custom-edited reality show designed just for you. And the edits are so good, you don't notice the missing footage. Someone else, living in the same street, at the same time, could be seeing a different episode entirely. Here's where things get even stranger. If you accept that reality is shaped by perception, then having an infinite number of possible perspectives means there's an infinite number of potential realities you could inhabit, all based on where you choose to mentally stand. You could be living in a reality defined by opportunity, beauty, and subtle wonder, or in one defined by danger, scarcity, and conflict. The difference isn't in the world, it's in your perspective. And yet, Whichever one you choose becomes true for you, because your mind will unconsciously seek evidence to confirm it. This leads to the infinite perspectives paradox. If reality is filtered by perspective, and every perspective creates its own version of reality, then there is no single fixed, real reality to be found. Each one is self-consistent within its own frame, but incomplete when compared to the infinite whole. But here's the mind-bending twist that keeps philosophers up at night. If you could somehow hold all perspectives at once, if you could see the entire infinite painting of reality from every possible position simultaneously, would you finally know the full truth? Or would it become meaningless, an incomprehensible blur where no single detail stands out? This question mirrors a phenomenon in quantum physics. When you observe a particle, you define its position or velocity, but not both at once. The act of observation collapses its infinite possibilities into a single measurable state. Perspectives work the same way. The moment you take a side or choose an angle, you collapse an infinite reality into a finite one, clear enough to navigate, but at the cost of all the other possibilities. And this has a hidden implication for your life. The world you inhabit tomorrow could be radically different from the world you live in today, even if the streets, people, and objects remain the same, simply because you choose a different perspective. The power to shift your reality isn't in changing the external world first. It's in moving your mental position in the gallery of infinite perspectives. The real challenge, and perhaps the real art, is learning to move fluidly between them. To be able to stand in one perspective long enough to act effectively in it, but flexible enough to step into another when your reality becomes too narrow, too rigid, or too small. Because in the end, there may be no single correct perspective, only the one that serves your purpose in the moment. And knowing this might be the closest we ever come to seeing the whole infinite painting. The human subconscious is not a single vault of hidden memories. It is more like an endless labyrinth, an intricate network of tunnels, chambers, and secret staircases buried deep beneath the surface of awareness. We often imagine our conscious mind as the main house of thought, where we live day to day, while the subconscious is the mysterious basement we rarely visit. But in truth, the subconscious is not beneath it, surrounds us, above, below, and through the cracks in the walls of conscious thought, influencing us in ways we do not even notice. To enter this labyrinth, one must first understand its nature. The subconscious is a record keeper, but it does not archive experiences like a neat filing cabinet. Instead, it keeps fragment smells tied to childhood laughter, shapes of shadows from forgotten rooms, the texture of a coat you wore when you were 8 years old. These fragments weave together into patterns, and those patterns influence your moods, preferences, and fears. For example, your aversion to a certain perfume may have nothing to do with its current wearer, but everything to do with the fact that your kindergarten teacher, who once scolded you harshly, wore it daily. The labyrinth is more than memory. It is also a workshop. Every night, as you sleep, your subconscious wanders these corridors, rearranging the furniture of your mental world. It decides which experiences to keep vivid and which to let fade into the mist. This is why certain dreams seem so bizarre. They are the subconscious test runs, where memories, emotions, and fears collide in simulated situations. It is trial and error on a mental stage, preparing you for challenges you don't yet know you will face. One of the labyrinth's greatest mysteries is its hidden rooms, the deep subconscious. This is where primal instincts live, alongside the autopilot functions that allow you to breathe, walk, and react without thinking. But mixed in with these functions are forgotten solutions to old problems, creative ideas that never reached the surface, and even echoes of thoughts you never consciously had, but somehow felt. Have you ever suddenly known the answer to a problem without knowing how? That is the subconscious slipping you a note through a hidden doorway in the labyrinth. For centuries, mystics, psychologists, and philosophers have tried to map this mental maze. Hypnosis, meditation, free association, each is an attempt to navigate the winding halls without losing one's way. But there is no complete map because the labyrinth changes. New experiences carve new paths, while old ones collapse into rubble or overgrow with vines of forgetfulness. The doorway you find today may not exist tomorrow. There are, however, guides, patterns in the mind that act like lanterns in the dark. One such lantern is emotion. Strong emotional responses, joy, grief, terror tend to cluster around certain memories, illuminating the surrounding corridors. By following these emotional lights inward, you can uncover surprising truths about yourself. Another lantern is habit. The routines you follow without thinking are like well-worn trails through the labyrinth. They can lead to the hidden centers where your beliefs and values are stored, untouched by daily distractions. The danger of the labyrinth is that it can trap you. Phobias, compulsions, and destructive beliefs often live in loop's circular corridors, where thought and feeling chase each other endlessly. Without intervention, a person can wander these loops for years, never finding the exit. This is why self-reflection and psychological insight are not luxuries. They are survival tools. They allow you to see the pattern of the loop and eventually break free. In sleep, the labyrinth becomes more active. The mind's gatekeepers relax, and dream imagery slips freely from one room to another. A smell from dinner can mingle with a childhood memory, forming a dream where you are eating with someone who passed away years ago. These dream encounters are not meaningless. They are the subconscious experimenting, running emotional simulations, and sometimes delivering messages and symbols. For those who learn to lucid dream, the labyrinth can be navigated deliberately. You can enter a corridor, choose a door, and see what lies beyond. Artists, writers, and inventors have long used dreams as a creative resource, bringing back visions, melodies, and storylines from these mental expeditions. In this way, the labyrinth is not just a prison or a puzzle, it is a treasure vault. The subconscious labyrinth is always with you, whether you explore it or not. Every instinctive decision, every gut feeling, every strange coincidence you notice is shaped by it. The mind you think of as you is only the central courtyard. The rest is a sprawling, shifting city of memories, fears, hopes, and patterns. The key to unlocking its power lies in gentle curiosity. You cannot force open its doors, but you can linger by them, listening for the faint echoes from the other side. A remembered dream, a sudden wave of nostalgia, an unexplained hunch, each is an invitation to step deeper into the maze. The more you explore, the more you will find that the labyrinth is not separate from you. It is you. And every turn you take within it leads, eventually, back to the center where the conscious and subconscious meet and you are whole. The mind you occupy is not fixed like a statue carved in stone. Instead, it is a dynamic architecture, constantly tearing down and rebuilding its own walls, corridors, and chambers. This process, neuroplasticity, is the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to experience, thought, and intention. But while science celebrates this as a hopeful revelation, the deeper truth is far more unsettling. You are perpetually remodeling the prison that confines you, sometimes without realizing it. Neuroplasticity means your beliefs, fears, habits, and even personality traits are not set in immutable biology. Instead, they are patterns of neural activity, electric whispers coursing through synapses that can strengthen or weaken depending on what you pay attention to. Every repeated thought lays a new brick. Every avoided feeling leaves a gap. Over time, these patterns form the mental landscape you call self. This landscape is both your sanctuary and your cage. The comforting routines and mental shortcuts that make life bearable also limit your perception and choices. The voice that tells you, "I'm just like this," is not a fixed truth. It is the echo of pathways worn deep by repetition. And the challenge is that rewiring requires effort, discomfort, and an unsettling confrontation with the parts of yourself you've ignored or denied. The first step toward reshaping your mind is awareness, learning to recognize the patterns that run beneath your conscious thoughts. This is why mindfulness practices have become so popular. By observing your own mind with curiosity, without judgment, you begin to see the loops, the triggers, the automatic reactions. Like a mapmaker charting unknown terrain, you start to understand the architecture of your own labyrinth. But awareness alone is not enough. To remodel your mind, you must actively choose new patterns. This is where intention becomes a powerful tool. When you deliberately focus on a thought or feeling, whether it's gratitude, compassion, or resilience, you strengthen the neural circuits that support it. Over time, this can alter how your brain processes information, changing not only your emotional responses, but your very experience of reality. Yet here lies the paradox. Your intention to change is itself a pattern, often limited by the very mental architecture you wish to escape. Old habits tug at you like hidden anchors. The subconscious resists upheaval, preferring the familiar even if painful to the unknown. This resistance can show up as procrastination, self-sabotage, or numbness. It is the mind's way of protecting its current structure from collapse. One of the most profound ways to rewire your brain is through dreams. During sleep, the brain consolidates memories and prunes synapses, strengthening some connections and weakening others. Lucid dreaming takes advantage of this process by allowing you to consciously influence dream content. By practicing awareness in dreams, you can confront fears, rehearse new behaviors, or explore creative solutions in a realm where the usual rules don't apply. Dream manipulation is not just a party trick. It's a form of deep mental plasticity. By engaging with your subconscious directly, you send signals that ripple through waking life. Fear faced in a nightmare may lose its power. A new skill visualized in a dream may translate into improved performance. Symbols discovered in the labyrinth of sleep can inspire insights impossible to reach in daylight. But rewiring is not limited to sleep. Your waking habits sculpt your brain every moment. Language shapes thought. What you say to yourself becomes the blueprint for neural remodeling. If you habitually tell yourself, "I'm weak," or "I can't," those words reinforce circuits of helplessness. Conversely, even small affirmations, repeated consistently, can build resilience. This makes your internal dialogue a battleground. The mind is a story machine, endlessly narrating your experience. You have the power to rewrite the script, but it demands vigilance and patience. Change rarely happens overnight. It is a slow erosion of old patterns, brick by brick, thought by thought. The unsettling reality is that no matter how much you try, some parts of the labyrinth resist. Trauma, deeply embedded beliefs, and unconscious fears can anchor sections of your mind against remodeling. Sometimes those walls collapse, only under pressure through crisis, loss, or shock, forcing sudden, radical rewiring. But other times, they remain, silent and unmoving, shaping your life beneath your awareness. So the architecture of your mind is both a living creation and a prison. You are the architect, but also the inhabitant. Each choice, each thought is a hammer or a chisel shaping your future corridors. Yet the process is invisible and ongoing. The question becomes, will you build walls or windows? Windows that let in new light and perspectives, or walls that keep the world out but trap you inside? Language is the medium through which you construct your reality, yet it is also the prison that limits what you can perceive and express. Every thought you think is clothed in words, and those words shape how you interpret the world, yourself, and others. The paradox is that language both liberates and confines. It is a tool for creation, but also a filter that narrows infinite experience into finite symbols. Consider how a simple word like love carries a universe of meanings: affection, obsession, warmth, pain, desire. When you speak or think the word, your mind instantly categorizes complex feelings into one box. This categorization is essential. Without it, the chaos of emotion would be impossible to navigate. But in doing so, language simplifies, compresses, and sometimes distorts the raw flood of experience. Linguists and philosophers have long wrestled with this tension. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis posits that the language you speak shapes your perception of reality. For example, some languages have multiple words for what English calls snow, each describing subtle differences in texture or appearance. Speakers of these languages perceive snow differently because their vocabulary allows them to notice distinctions that others gloss over. In your own mind, language carves out the categories through which you understand time, space, identity, morality. The sentences you form become frameworks for thought, often so ingrained that you mistake them for truth rather than constructs. For example, the idea of a self as a consistent, unchanging entity is largely a linguistic invention. You tell stories about you, creating a narrative identity that seems continuous. But beneath the words, the experience is fluid and fragmented. This is the cage of language. It enforces boundaries on what can be thought or said. When you try to describe an ineffable feeling or a complex sensation, you often fall short. The words fail to capture the depth, nuance, or ambiguity. The mind instinctively wants to fill in the gaps with cliches or familiar phrases, losing originality and precision. Yet language is also the key. By becoming aware of how language shapes thought, you gain power over your mind's architecture. You can deliberately expand your vocabulary, learn new languages, or engage with poetry, metaphor, and paradox to loosen the grip of habitual categories. This is why some spiritual traditions emphasize mantra, chant, or sacred language to access states of mind beyond ordinary verbal thought. The interplay between language and thought is recursive. Language shapes thought, and thought shapes language. When you learn a new word or phrase, it can open up a new way of seeing. Conversely, entrenched linguistic patterns can reinforce biases, limiting what you believe is possible or real. For example, cultural narratives about success, failure, or identity often trap individuals in predefined roles. Moreover, internal dialogue, the voice inside your head, is itself linguistic. It narrates your experience, judges your actions, and anticipates future events. This narrative can become a tyrant, replaying self-criticism, doubt, or fear. But by consciously changing the narrative, you can rewire your emotional responses and reshape your sense of self. The challenge is that most people accept their internal language without question, unaware that it is malleable. You might catch yourself thinking, "I'm not good enough," or "I always fail," and believe these are facts rather than linguistic habits. Recognizing these as just words patterns you can change opens a door to transformation. But beware, language can also be weaponized by the mind to defend its existing architecture. Rationalizations, justifications, and mental stories create a fortress around old beliefs and fears. The mind uses language to convince itself that change is impossible or unnecessary. This is the resistance you meet when attempting mental rewiring. So, language is a double-edged sword. It is the tool through which your mind constructs meaning, identity, and reality. but it also limits, filters, and can imprison you in fixed patterns. The paradox is that to break free, you must first engage deeply with language, learn its limits, explore its possibilities, and rewrite the stories you tell yourself. In the silence beyond words, there may be a glimpse of something unnameable, a raw experience beyond the linguistic cage. But to reach that silence, you must first pass through the gate of language consciously, wielding it as both shield and key. Memory is often considered the foundation of identity, the archive that holds the story of who you are, the ledger of your past experiences, the record of your triumphs and traumas. But what if that archive is not a fixed, accurate ledger, but a constantly rewritten manuscript, edited by your mind to fit a narrative that changes with each recall? The unsettling truth is that memory is not a passive replay of the past. It is an active process of reconstruction. Every time you remember something, you don't access a perfect recording, you reconstruct it anew, filling in gaps, altering details, and even inventing entire scenes without realizing. The memory you hold now is different from the memory you had a month, a year, or a decade ago. This phenomenon is well documented in psychological research. Elizabeth Loftus's pioneering work on false memories showed that people can be led to remember events that never happened. Through suggestion, misinformation, or simple repetition, a mind integrates new details into existing memories, blurring the line between fact and fiction. This is why eyewitness testimonies are notoriously unreliable. Memories are malleable, not fixed. More disconcerting is the idea that this constant rewriting serves an emotional purpose. The mind reshapes memories to protect the self, to maintain coherence, or to avoid unbearable pain. For example, a traumatic event might be remembered in a fragmented, associated way, or altered to minimize personal responsibility or guilt. Conversely, positive memories can become exaggerated, polished over time into stories of glory or innocence. This means your personal history is less a set of facts and more a narrative that evolves to support your current identity. You remember who you need to be, not necessarily who you were. The past is not a distant land, but a living part of the present, constructed and reconstructed to fit your mental state. Neuroscience reveals the mechanisms behind this. When you recall a memory, the neural circuits encoding that memory become active, but they are also vulnerable to change during this window. This is called the reconsolidation process. New information or feelings present at the time of recall can modify the original memory trace, rewriting it. This instability of memory has profound consequences. It means your sense of continuity, the feeling that you are the same person over. Time is built on shifting sands. The you who existed 5 years ago might be remembered differently by your current mind, and that difference shapes your identity now. Philosophers have long grappled with this fluidity. The ancient Greek Heraclitus famously said, "You cannot step into the same river twice," implying that both the river and the person stepping are in constant flux. Memory, as a flowing river, carries fragments of the past, but never the exact same water. The implications for selfhood are chilling. If your memories are unreliable, what anchors your identity? Is the self just a collection of shifting stories stitched together by language and emotion? If the narrative changes, does the I change as well? And if so, who are you truly? Consider how this affects your perception of reality. The past you remember shapes your expectations, fears, and hopes. If you recall a childhood as loving and safe, you are likely to approach relationships with trust. But if your memories are filled with neglect or betrayal, your mind builds walls, preparing for danger. Yet both sets of memories are not objective truths, but reconstructions, fabrications to serve emotional survival. This means your worldview, your emotional responses, and your decisions are all based on a foundation that is fundamentally unstable. The past you rely on to navigate the present is an ever-changing illusion, a ghostly script that you rewrite every time you rehearse it. Even your memories of memories are altered. Remembering a past argument with a friend today will be influenced by your current feelings toward that friend, your mood, and your desires for reconciliation or distance. The event you remember is not the event that happened. It is the event filtered through layers of evolving perspective and emotion. What's more, collective memory, the shared stories, cultures, and societies tell themselves, works the same way. History is written and rewritten by those in power, filtered through myths, propaganda, and selective forgetting. The truth of history is often less important than the narrative it serves. This recursive rewriting leads to a dark question. If both your personal and collective memories are unstable, how can you trust anything beyond the present moment? The anchor of self in society is at best a floating buoy in a shifting sea. Yet this does not mean memory is useless. The brain's ability to reshape memories is also its strength. It allows healing, growth, and adaptation. Traumatic memories can be softened, and new interpretations can open paths to forgiveness and change. But this power demands humility and vigilance. Humility to accept the fragility of your past, and vigilance to question the stories you tell yourself. In this light, the act of remembering becomes a delicate dance between truth and fiction, stability and flux, self-preservation and self-deception. You are not a passive witness to your history, but an active author, constantly rewriting the manuscript of your life with all the power and peril that entails. And so, as you drift toward sleep, ask yourself, how much of your past is real? And how much is the story your mind needs you to believe? As you sink into sleep, your mind crosses the threshold into a realm that defies the boundaries of waking logic. Dreams emerge not as neat recordings of the past, nor as mere fantasies of the future, but as a hybrid landscape where memory, imagination, and emotion intertwine in complex and often unsettling ways. Here, the mind is neither fully tethered to reality nor fully free. It inhabits a liminal space where the rules are rewritten each night. Dreams are, in many ways, the mind's laboratory of reconstruction. Neuroscientific studies reveal that during REM, rapid eye movement sleep, the brain is highly active, processing and integrating experiences from the day and long-term memories alike. But this integration is far from orderly. Fragments of distant memories collide with recent emotions. Old fears mingle with fresh hopes, and symbols surface from deep subconscious wells. The result is a narrative that often feels incoherent, bizarre, or hauntingly vivid. This chaotic blending serves a critical function. Dreaming is believed to aid in emotional regulation and memory consolidation. By revisiting experiences in altered, symbolic forms, the brain works through unresolved conflicts and strengthens the neural networks that support learning and adaptation. Yet this process is not a gentle one. Dreams can be terrifying, surreal, and disorienting because they pull from the depths of your psyche, the very parts you might prefer to keep hidden. Philosophically, dreams challenge the solidity of waking reality. If in dreams, your mind freely edits and reconstructs experience, how can you trust the waking self to hold an unshakable grasp on truth? Consider that many dreams include elements you recognize: a face, a place, a feeling, but twisted in ways that defy coherence. This suggests that memory itself is flexible, not a static archive, but a malleable fabric woven anew each time it is touched. The boundaries between memory and imagination blur profoundly in dreams. A face in your dream might be a composite of people you've known, distorted by emotions you can't name. A place might shift from your childhood home to a strange, impossible geography. Actions you take might be guided by instincts rather than conscious thought, unfolding like a film whose script you only partly remember. The dream world is a palimpsest layers of past, present, and fantasy, overriding each other in fluid motion. This overlap is not mere whimsy. Psychologists like Carl Jung argued that dreams reveal the collective unconscious archetypal images and motifs shared across humanity, emerging spontaneously in personal dreams. These symbols connect individual memory to a deeper, universal psyche. When you dream of a shadowy figure or a vast ocean, you tap into primordial images that resonate beyond your personal history. Despite their seeming strangeness, dreams can feel profoundly real. The emotions you experience in dreams, fear, joy, despair, are not simulations, but genuine states felt in the moment. Upon waking, the intensity of these feelings can linger, coloring your perception of the day ahead. The dream experience is thus both ephemeral and impactful. Fleeting and lasting. Modern research into lucid dreaming, where the dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming, adds another layer to this puzzle. Lucid dreamers can, to some extent, influence their dreams, exploring the labyrinth of the subconscious with a flicker of conscious control. This phenomenon reveals that the division between waking and dreaming mind is porous, and that awareness itself is not a fixed point, but a shifting spectrum. The fluidity of dreams reflects the fluidity of memory and identity. Just as your memories reconstruct the past to fit present needs, your dreams reconstruct experience to process emotion and desire. In both cases, the mind is not a faithful recorder, but a creative storyteller, weaving narratives that serve survival, adaptation, and meaning-making. This creative storytelling can also mislead. The vividness of dreams can implant false memories or reinforce distorted beliefs. Nightmares can replay traumatic themes, embedding fear deeper into the psyche. Recurring dreams might trap you in cycles of unresolved conflict, echoing the loops of the subconscious labyrinth discussed earlier. Because dreams dwell in this uneasy middle ground, neither fully remembered nor fully imagined, they challenge the notion of a stable self. If your waking identity is grounded in memory, and memory is mutable and dreamlike, then what anchors the I who remembers and dreams? Perhaps the self is less a fixed entity and more a process, an ongoing act of narrative construction fluctuating between waking and sleeping states. This realization is not comforting. It erodes the certainty of a solid, continuous identity and exposes the mind as a restless, unstable phenomenon. Yet it also offers a glimpse into the profound mystery of consciousness, a system capable of generating worlds within worlds, bridging past, present, and possibility in the silent theater of the night. So, as you drift into sleep, consider this. Your dreams are not just random flickers of brain activity or meaningless stories. They are the mind's way of bending and folding reality, of exploring the spaces where memory fades into imagination. In that fluid space, what you experience is both deeply personal and astonishingly strange, an echo of the unstable self that carries you through each waking moment. Time, as you experience it, flows smoothly forward, a river carrying moments from past to future. Yet beneath this comforting illusion lies a fractured mirror reflecting a far more complex and disorienting reality. Your perception of time is intimately tied to memory and the sense of self, both of which, as you have seen, are unstable and mutable. When these foundations shift, the very fabric of time begins to unravel, collapsing your neat chronology into a chaotic tangle of moments. Psychologists have long studied how humans perceive time, and the results reveal striking distortions. Past is not a static collection of events, but a constantly rewritten narrative shaped by your current emotions and beliefs. Memories, fragile, reconstructed, and selective, are the glue that binds moments together into a coherent past. Yet, as you reconstruct memory, you rewrite history, altering how past and present intersect. This interplay becomes clearer through experiments on time perception. People under stress often experience time as slowing down, with moments dragging interminably. Conversely, periods of intense focus or joy can seem to compress time, making hours feel like minutes. These distortions arise because your brain does not passively register time. It actively constructs it based on attention, emotion, and memory. Philosophers, such as Henry Bergson, argued that time or duration is subjective and internal flow experienced differently by each individual, unlike the objective ticking of clocks. The now you live in is a fleeting, ever-changing point that can never be captured fully, slipping immediately into past and becoming inaccessible. Your brain's attempts to stitch together these fragments into continuity is itself an act of creation. But this creation is imperfect. The unstable self, the shifting narrative of identity, exacerbates the fragmentation. If your sense of I depends on memory, and memory is malleable, then your personal timeline is fluid, constantly edited and reshaped. One day, you may recall a childhood event with fondness. Another day, the same event might surface as painful or confusing, altering your timeline and emotional map. Neuroscience deepens this paradox. Studies show that recalling a memory activates brain areas involved in imagining the future. The mind uses past experiences as templates for constructing possible futures, blurring the boundaries between what has been and what might be. This means your future is partially shaped by the narratives you tell about your past, creating feedback loops that can entrap you in cycles of hope, despair, or denial. Trauma illustrates this collapse vividly. Those suffering post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, often relive moments from their past as if trapped outside of time. Flashbacks collapse past and present, rupturing the linear flow. For them, time fractures into endless now moments of fear and pain, eroding the continuity of self. Even in everyday life, you experience moments when time warps, the déjà vu sensation, for example, where a present moment feels eerily familiar, as if borrowed from memory or another reality. These glitches reveal the mind's fragile handling of temporal information, the fragile dance of encoding and decoding moments into a seamless stream. This fracturing is not limited to subjective experience. Modern physics also questions time's fundamental nature. The theory of relativity shows that time is relative, dependent on speed and gravity, and not absolute. Quantum mechanics suggests that time may not flow continuously at the smallest scales. These scientific insights mirror the psychological unraveling you experience internally. What does this mean for your existence? If time is unstable, if memory and self bend and rewrite history, then the present you inhabit is a fragile construct, a provisional story told by your mind to anchor consciousness. The present is not a fixed point, but a shifting nexus where past, future, memory, and imagination collide. This realization can be deeply disorienting. You may question how much control you truly have if your timeline is fluid and your self is fragmented. Your plans, your regrets, your hopes, all are threads woven into a tapestry that your mind continuously unravels and reweaves. Yet, this collapse of time also reveals a freedom hidden beneath the illusion. If the past is not fixed, you can reinterpret it, healing wounds or reclaiming lost parts of yourself. If the future is not predetermined, you hold the power to shape it through your present choices. The fractured mirror of time reflects both your entrapment and your potential to transcend. But beware the seductive comfort of rewriting memories or futures to avoid pain. The mind's editing can also trap you in illusions, preventing authentic engagement with reality. The key lies in embracing the instability, walking the narrow line between self-deception and self-awareness. As you confront the collapsing architecture of time, you may find that your existence is less a linear journey and more a fractal pattern, recursive loops of memory and anticipation, folding back upon themselves endlessly. This pattern is at once chaotic and beautiful, terrifying and profound. So ask yourself now, if your present moment is shaped by memories you cannot trust and futures you cannot predict, what remains truly real? And who, in this fractured flow, is the you that experiences it all? You live convinced that your actions ripple outward in a neat chain of cause and effect. You decide. You act, the world responds. This belief that your choices create consequences in a linear timeline is the bedrock of your sense of agency, responsibility, and freedom. But beneath this comforting narrative lies a deeper fracture. Causality itself is an illusion, a construct woven by your mind to make sense of a chaotic universe that neither guarantees nor respects your free will. The classical view, ingrained from childhood, tells you that time flows like a river, carrying your choices forward, shaping a future that unfolds logically from the past. You believe that if you pick A, then B must follow, that every effect has a cause, and that you, the conscious I, stand at the helm steering the ship. Yet science and philosophy reveal that this neat progression is far less certain than it seems. Physics, especially quantum mechanics, shatters the certainty of cause and effect. At the smallest scales, particles behave unpredictably. Events occur without clear causes. Outcomes emerge from probabilities rather than deterministic laws. This indeterminacy implies that the universe is not a clockwork machine, but a restless sea of potentialities, collapsing into specific realities only when observed or measured. A cause is no longer prior and absolute. It dissolves into uncertainty. Moreover, chaos theory tells us that even in deterministic systems, tiny differences in initial conditions can lead to wildly divergent outcomes. The flutter of a butterfly's wings can cascade into storms across the globe. This sensitivity undermines the idea that causes straightforwardly lead to predictable effects, revealing instead a world of tangled, branching possibilities. If the external universe lacks neat causality, what does this mean for your internal sense of free will? Neuroscience provides unsettling answers. Experiments by Benjamin Libet and others show that brain activity predicting a decision occurs milliseconds before you become consciously aware of making that decision. Your sense of choosing is preceded by unconscious neural processes that prepare and initiate action. You feel like the captain of your mind, but often you are the passenger watching events unfold. This revelation fractures your self-image. If your decisions emerge from unconscious processes you do not control, is your conscious self merely an observer, an after-the-fact storyteller claiming ownership? The experience of volition, of agency, may be a constructed narrative designed to create coherence and responsibility rather than a genuine causal force. Philosophers have debated this conundrum for centuries. Determinism, the view that all events are caused by prior events, suggests free will is illusory. Libertarian free will insists on genuine choice, independent of causality. Compatibilism tries to reconcile the two, redefining freedom as the ability to act according to desires and reasoning, even if those desires have causes beyond your control. Yet the core discomfort remains. The fracture between what you feel you control and the underlying machinery of brain and universe that may render that control superficial. Your experience of time complicates this fracture further. As Section 35 revealed, your perception of past and future is unstable, reconstructed, and fluid. Without a stable timeline, the neat chain of cause and effect unravels. If memories of past choices shift with emotion and reinterpretation, then the causes you attribute to current states become slippery. If the future is a fog of possibilities shaped by mutable narratives, then the effects of your actions become uncertain. This uncertainty seeps into your psychology. You might oscillate between feeling empowered to change your life and feeling trapped by invisible forces habits. conditioning subconscious drives that steer you like a puppet on frayed strings. The illusion of free will is necessary for functioning, but may also mask profound helplessness. Moreover, your brain's tendency to seek patterns and assign causality creates false narratives, superstitions, conspiracy theories, and magical thinking. Your mind demands order, even if that order is fabricated. You might blame a failed project on a single mistake or praise yourself for luck, weaving causes where none truly exist. These narratives become self-reinforcing loops, distorting your understanding and deepening the fracture between reality and perception. The recursive nature of consciousness exacerbates the problem. You think about thinking, question your choices, and analyze motives endlessly. This self-reflection can either illuminate or entangle you further in causal illusions. When you ask, "Why did I do that?" you may find no clear answer, only layers of conditioned responses, emotional undercurrents, and fleeting impulses. The causal chain dissolves into noise. This noise can breed existential dread. If your free will is an illusion, then what meaning do your choices have? Are you responsible for your actions, or merely a passenger on an uncontrollable ride? The mind, desperate for certainty, may respond with denial, repression, or frantic assertion of control, sometimes manifesting in obsession, anxiety, or self-sabotage. Yet, paradoxically, acknowledging this fracture can lead to a different kind of freedom. By seeing causality and free will as constructed narratives rather than absolute truths, you may loosen the grip of self-judgment and fear. You recognize that your mind is a complex system, influenced by myriad factors beyond conscious control, and that identity is fluid rather than fixed. This insight invites a form of radical acceptance, not resignation, but the embrace of uncertainty and complexity. You can cultivate awareness of unconscious influences, recognize patterns without being enslaved by them, and find agency within the spaces where choice and conditioning intertwine. But beware the seductive trap of fatalism. Recognizing the limits of causality does not mean surrendering to passivity. It means navigating the labyrinth with eyes open to its illusions and shadows, wielding intention as a tool rather than a guarantee. So, in this fractured world where cause and effect are elusive, and free will flickers like a candle in a storm, what does it mean to truly act? How do you claim ownership of your choices when the self that chooses is itself a shifting constellation of influences? And if your sense of agency is a fragile narrative, what remains at the core of your being? You have believed in yourself as a singular, continuous being, the I that persists through time, thoughts, and experiences. This self is the anchor of your existence, the narrator of your life's story, the subject behind every choice and every memory. Yet, after peeling back the layers of memory's instability, the fracturing of time, and the illusion of causality, you are forced to confront a disturbing truth. The self you cling to is fragmented, fluid, and ultimately elusive. Psychologists and philosophers alike have long grappled with this concept. William James described the self as a stream of consciousness, never static, but forever in flux. Modern cognitive science reveals that the brain does not harbor a central self-module. Instead, multiple systems, each with distinct roles, interact to produce the experience of unity. Your sense of a coherent self is a construct, a story your brain tells to weave together disparate processes, memories, perceptions, emotions, and intentions. This fragmentation shows in everyday experience. You are not one constant entity, but a collection of shifting roles, moods, and desires. The person you are with friends differs from the one at work or alone in reflection. Conflicting impulses tug you in different directions. Your values may clash, your beliefs fluctuate. The self feels like a house with many rooms, sometimes harmonious, sometimes at war. Neurologically, Conditions like dissociative identity disorder, formerly called multiple personality disorder, illustrate extreme cases where the brain fragments identity into distinct, sometimes competing personalities. But even without such diagnosis, everyone experiences moments when the self fractures. During intense stress, trauma, or profound introspection, the seamless narrative ruptures. This fracturing extends to your memories. As Section 33 revealed, each recollection reshapes your past, changing the narrative that defines you. You rewrite who you were to explain who you are now, but in doing so, you create multiple versions of yourself across time, none perfectly aligned. Philosophers like David Hume argue that the self is nothing but a bundle of perceptions, without an underlying essence. When you try to grasp the I, you find only fleeting thoughts, sensations, and emotions, never a fixed core. This challenges the intuitive belief that there is a central me behind it all. The fracturing self also challenges morality and responsibility. If you are a fluid constellation of parts, how can you be held accountable in the conventional sense? Who owns the past mistakes or the present desires? The mind often struggles with this ambiguity, leading to guilt, self-judgment, or dissociation. Your culture, language, and social environment reinforce the myth of a unified self. Stories, laws, and ethics rely on the assumption that you are a stable identity with consistent traits. But beneath this veneer, the pieces shift constantly. This instability extends to your relationship with others. When you interact, you project a self onto the world, a mask tailored for social survival. Yet inside, multiple selves exist, hidden even from your own awareness. The tension between these selves can create feelings of alienation and fragmentation, yet this shattering is not just loss, it is also potential. Recognizing the self as fluid allows you to loosen rigid attachments to identity, to explore new ways of being. Practices like mindfulness and meditation reveal that the I can be observed, not as an unchanging essence, but as a process. This awareness can dissolve suffering rooted in identity clinging. However, this process is perilous. The dissolution of self can provoke existential terror, the void where certainty once lived. The mind resists, building defenses, stories, and illusions to preserve the familiar me. The descent into this awareness is not a gentle awakening, but a psychological upheaval. As you stand on the edge of this abyss, ask yourself, if the self is not a singular, continuous entity, then what is the you that watches, thinks, and feels? Is there an essence beyond the fractured narrative? Or is emptiness the final truth beneath all illusions? This question remains unresolved, an echo in the labyrinth of your mind, an invitation and a warning. You have traveled far into the depths, peeling back layers of memory, time, language, causality, and self, only to find not a solid ground beneath your feet, but an abyss yawning wide. The narratives you relied on to make sense of your existence are illusions, projections conjured by a restless mind desperate for order amidst chaos. Reality, as you perceived it, is no more than a fractal dance of shadows and reflections, endlessly folding back on itself, dissolving certainty into endless questions. The self you believed was singular and stable is revealed as a shattered mosaic, each piece a transient pattern flickering in consciousness. The past you clutch is a shifting tapestry of reconstructions, rewritten every time you dare remember. The future you plan is a fog of probabilities, shaped by fragile intentions and the whims of a quantum universe indifferent to your will. Time itself linear, continuous, absolute, is exposed as a fragile construct, a mirage shimmering at the edge of perception. Your sense of agency, the very feeling that you choose and act, crumbles under scrutiny. Beneath the surface, unconscious forces, neural cascades, and chaotic probabilities govern your decisions. Free will is not a shining beacon, but a flickering candle caught in a storm of indeterminacy. Causality, that comforting chain linking action to consequence, dissolves into tangled webs with no clear beginning or end. Language, the tool you use to shape thought, is both key and cage. It simplifies the infinite, carves meaning from formless. Experience, but also blinds you to the vastness beyond words. Through language, you narrate a self that never fully exists, a story that both shelters and imprisons you. And so, you stand before the abyss, stripped of certainties, naked in the cold light of unknowing. A mind recoils, instinctively grasping, for meaning, for comfort, for a tether to cling to. But none is found. Instead, only the infinite void, the silent vastness beyond all stories. This is the final collapse, not of hope, for hope was never truly yours, but of illusion. The collapse of the frameworks that held your reality together. The erasure of the you who believed in control, coherence, and permanence. And yet, in this abyss, there is no salvation, no final answer, no transcendence. Only the endless echo of questions that fold back onto themselves, like a hall of mirrors with no exit. Who, then, are you? A flicker in the void? A story told by a restless mind? Or something beyond all that? Something forever beyond your grasp? There is no reply, only silence.